How's it going, everyone out there? Hoping everyone is doing well. Welcome back to Spooky Japan Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, but I also have a very special co host with me today. As you see, I have two handsome guys, so I'm going to have to try really hard to make sure I keep paying attention. But let me introduce my co host for this evening. That's going to be Nick. He has several podcasts of his own, including Fear Fans, which focus on horror movies, which I figured would be perfect to help me with our kick-ass guest. Hopefully, we can have a kick-ass show. So, how you doing today, Nick?
Been doing great. Been very busy, but keeping up. I mean, keeping up with everything, especially with Halloween getting closer. So it's been cool. But hey, I've been enjoying it though. That's what's most important.
And today we have a very special guest with us, Devon. How would you introduce yourself to everyone out there who's maybe not familiar with you and your work, and tell us about the movies that you've done?
Yeah, for sure. I'm from Swift Current, Saskatchewan, in Canada. I make very low budget horror films, and I raise money for the local rescue animal shelters. And we raised about $34,000 for our local one. And we're starting to expand to different cities and help out animal shelters in different cities as well.
Hey, Nikki.
Hey, Nikki.
That's awesome. That is always something I wanted to do. Is trying to do some kind of fundraiser for the animal shelter.
Oh, definitely. I figured combining two of my biggest passions, animals and horror movies, are. And then there's a dog coming in right now. His name is Barry. You'll make appearances for sure.
Just like with my cat. This is my cat, Slinky, by the way. She makes a lot of appearances on camera too. She's not a rescue, but she was a stray, so we did adopt her.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, Barry's been in all my podcast appearances. I think every time I start talking, he'll come into the room.
I guess it happens with most pets. That some people are like, I had to lock my dog out, lock my cats out, or they'd be in here bothering me during this podcast. I have my dog in here with me. She's about 30 pounds, but she identifies as a dire wolf.
Nice.
So
Wow.
My dog's 130 and he identifies himself as a lap dog still.
I heard that a lot of big dogs still think they're small little lap dogs.
Oh, he crushes me sometimes. Like watching movies, he'd jump on top of me, and I don't think he knows how big he is, but I don't mind. I love animals so much.
So
I mean,
what
who
got you
doesn't?
started into the work that you're doing now with the low budget horror movies?
Oh, okay. Way back when I was a young kid, I got really big into horror movies due to my parents. Obviously, they're big into horror movies. My mom was more into like the Alfred Hitchcock, Psycho, The Birds. My dad was more into the slashers like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Chucky, Leatherface, all those guys. I watched all kinds of horror movies, but I definitely was big into slashers quite a bit. And my dad would take me to movie theaters all the time, show me all these horror movies. He'd rent these horror movies from video stores on VHS to show us. Chucky was the only one that scared me to death when I was a kid. I could not stand Chucky when I was a kid. That's one movie I just stayed away as possible. Hearing his voice creeped me out. So we'd watch horror movies together as family. We'd take me to out of town to watch horror movies. We'd go to haunted houses even for stuff like that. So horror movies, haunted house, horror, Halloween has been a big part of my life since I was a kid. And I started filming these little cheesy films with my brother, parents, action figures, whatever I can get my hands on, basically, and make these things just for myself. And then I met a few cool people in high school. We started making these short YouTube videos, and that expanded after high school. I met more friends. We're like, hey, we should make a bunch of horror films. And we started doing some horror films. And then we'd start doing some YouTube spoofs of horror films for $0 budgets. And then one day we should make a full-length film. And that started our first ever full-length film called Zombageddon in 2012. It was our first feature-length film.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, YouTube is good. I have mixed emotions about YouTube just because it's good for, like, seeing new stuff and getting inspired. But obviously, also a lot of people use YouTube for fake news and you just see, like, the fake investigations on there. I know especially out here in Japan,
Mhm.
that's that's what they mostly see from America is, like, the paranormal-wise, the fake stuff. And I mean, clearly fake where it's, the speakers in another room, or they have, like, the string pulling the door, and you're like, "Okay, this is really what you guys are seeing? No wonder why the younger generation is more skeptical than the older."
Yeah, the movies I release now are just on DVD. Um, I usually put like little teasers on Facebook or YouTube or social media platforms. But
Mhm.
yeah, I just keep it to physical media for DVDs so far. I thought about expanding to like digital, but people seem to like the physical media still. So I like having it in my hands.
Yeah, that's nice that there's still like a handful of people that like, again, even though we don't do VHS tapes anymore, the fact that people are still kind of appreciating in some way the older fashioned stuff like the DVDs or whatever, just to have a physical copy of it is great because, I know a lot of movies in this day and age are usually now, released through streaming or HBO Max or whatever
Mhm.
the case is. But sometimes for those type of movies, they only have like a certain date that they're available before they're gone completely. When in the case when you have a DVD in this case or a Blu-ray, you have a physical copy. That's never going to go away unless you break it. But other than that, it's never going to go away.
Oh, exactly. I think certain horror movies too are not on streaming at all. And like you said, it's rare sometimes to see those B movies on streaming. And then even go try to get a DVD or Blu-ray, it's like out of print. So it's cool having them just in case. You never know if you'll ever see that film again. So I love having that because I would hate to not see certain horror movies ever again. I would hate that feeling.
Well, especially with the physical, like, if it's just online, unfortunately, you might forget the title too. How many times that happened? Like, "Man, this is a really good movie, but I cannot remember the name of this
Yep.
horror movie."
Yes, exactly.
I'm like,
Even
"Well, I was gonna watch it with my friend here, but I guess I can't because I can't remember the name." I think
yes.
a few times I've had to message Nick, and I'm like, "I can't remember the name of this horror movie. I'm sure you've probably at least seen it," and he usually knows, and I'm like, "Yep, yeah, that's what it was. I don't know why I couldn't remember that name."
Yeah, it's a movie that you could think about daily, and the next minute it's gone, and you're like, I just can't think of the title right now.
Well, it's funny. It's like because honestly, when you think of all this talk already, I mean, there actually is some film out there that I remember watching. I was very well. I didn't really watch the entire movie. I just saw a part of it, but I do remember it was definitely scary. I don't know I mean, what I'm about to describe, it could be any one of these movies because it has the same scenario. There was a scene I can remember from this movie, like dealing like with these, I don't know if they were like farmers or something, but they had like these wide eyes. I don't know if they were blind or if they were just the way how they looked. And to this day, I still remember that, but I still don't remember what that film was called or whatever, or if it was like one of the old like horror television, like an episode from one of the television shows. The picture's there, but I can't think of the name either. So it goes kind of similar with the physical copies, and it's so frustrating. I've even tried looking it up, and I still can't find it.
That's great. That happens quite a bit. I actually watched a B movie like last year on Tubi because Tubi has a lot of B movies, and they had one certain scene in the movie that reminded me of Final Destination 2 with the log truck. They had
Oh
the
yeah.
same death scene, and that movie was like from the 80s, this one. So I was trying to tell people like Final Destination 2 wasn't the first one to have the log truck death scene. So then I was trying to find the title for it, and I've been on Reddit. I can't find the title of the movie anymore. So now I sound like I'm making it up.
Well, in this scene I'm talking about, I actually first thought maybe it was like an episode. If you guys remember that television series, Are You Afraid of the Dark on Nickelodeon?
Yes,
Oh,
I
yes.
grew up on that.
Awesome show. I know they revived it, but I heard it's not as good
Yeah,
as
but
the
it's
original.
not as good as the original.
No,
Like, if
it's
you grew up
not.
on the original, of course you get excited when you heard the reboot or whatever it is. Then you watch the new one and you're like, what is this garbage?
I know they revived it one time, like at the very end of the 90s, like 99, 2000. That was like the second one, but they still managed to carry on with what the original series was. But when they made the newer one, I think to myself, you know what? This is nowhere close to what the original series was like. So, but I actually thought it was an episode because it deals with a kid in it. But I tried looking up that episode, and even that was not one of the episodes either. So it's still a mystery film to this day.
Yeah, it doesn't ring a bell to me. When you said the farmers, I was like, oh, it's Motel Hell, and then you described like the eyes.
No,
I'm like, oh, that's not Motel Hell.
I just know it was somewhere probably like maybe late 80s. I would say somewhere around the late 80s or somewhere in the 90s, definitely.
Okay, I'm sure maybe somebody out there in this horror movie world knows.
Pickle Tom's in the house.
Pickle Nick.
The first horror movie I've seen, I actually saw, was 13 Ghosts.
Nice.
Oh yes.
At first it didn't scare me. Then I watched it a second time. I think it's the Jekyll. Is that what that character's name is? I think it is. That he scares the shit out of me. Something about he gave me nightmares, and then it's like every other time he either gives me a nightmare or he doesn't. To actually see if you saw that in real life, the Jekyll.
Yeah.
It's a good movie. I really enjoyed 13.
It still holds up.
It does.
It's one of those movies that still holds up. Not a lot of horror movies holds up to the day.
I think first one, I think for me would have to be, I mean, it's not officially like a horror film, but it definitely does have horror elements. In fact, I still watch it every year. Believe it or not, that's actually Nightmare Before Christmas. Even though it's not intended to be like fully like a full horror film, it does have the elements. But either way, I think with that, along with Are You Afraid of the Dark, again, both being released in the 90s, I think that's what actually introduced me into the horror genre. So that's probably my earliest horror film.
That's cool. Yeah, because like Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Freaky Stories, those kind of TV shows in the 90s kind of introduce a lot of kids, I think, to the horror films.
Just not as many nowadays compared to what they had back then. So
no.
Long live the 90s, I always say, but the 90s definitely had a lot of good horror series for kids.
Oh, yeah, I still remember Goosebumps and Freaky Stories. I'm not sure if you remember Freaky Stories with like
I don't remember that one.
Cockroach and the worm. They're telling different stories, and it happened to a friend of mine, kind of thing. Urban legends and all that.
I'm gonna have to look that up because for some reason I just can't remember that show.
It's probably one of those shows where you can look it up and you're like, oh, that one.
I feel like, yeah, once you see the cockroach or the worm, I'm sure you're like, oh yes, I seen a picture of those guys.
Okay, yeah, I just looked it up. It still doesn't ring a bell. I mean, maybe like from an episode or something like that, it might ring a bell then. But yeah, I don't remember these guys for some strange reason.
That's fair. It's on. I think it's on Tubi as well.
Okay.
I think everything's on Tubi nowadays.
Oh, I know.
Tubi or YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube probably has some of those too. But yeah, Tubi has a fair amount of horror movies from our like generation.
That's what I think was really beneficial.
Tubi don't pay. I don't think you pay for Tubi.
No, you don't. It's always usually free. I mean, you got to watch ads.
You have to watch ads, but if you can get past having good parts interrupted by an ad, it's usually pretty good.
You don't have to watch like one or two ads, I think, per movie, if that even.
Yeah, it's just I'd rather deal with the annoyance of that than having to pay like a few extra dollars just to have no ads at all. So that's just maybe that's just me, but again, as long as you're able to watch them, that particular film, that's all that matters then.
And they have a lot of like ones that you would never see on like Netflix or Amazon Prime.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Netflix is getting terrible with what they're putting on there, though.
I remember when Netflix first started, they had a lot of like independent B movies.
Oh yeah. Oh, real quick, I just wanted to say, Amanda, I also broadcast this because I know there's that stream it to your audience. I have it broadcast on my Facebook page. See, it's too bad. There are a few other people watching. Unfortunately, comments aren't showing up. But Emily Mentzhouse, who is, I don't know if you know who she is, but she said she hopped on. She heard freaky stories.
Yeah, for some odd reason, StreamYard's a hit and miss if it shows other platforms' comments or not. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's whatever StreamYard, I guess, feels like.
Yeah, that's why I'm checking the phone. It's to keep an eye on the comments, anyone that I might have missed, and she just said that she loves the lights. So thank you, Emily.
Yeah, I shared on my Facebook too, the streaming, so I'm not sure how much people are watching that too.
Growing up, I had friends. I never thought about this because my definition of horror is obviously, I mean, probably our definition of horror a lot, especially when you're into horror movies, a lot less things scare you than other people. A lot of my friends grew up saying the original Willy Wonka is what gave them nightmares.
Oh yeah, with Gene Wilder and that.
Yeah, and I never thought about that. They're like, well, if you actually break down what happened to Willy Wonka, it is terrifying. Like, especially with the squirrels, and that then she blew up into like the blue or purple.
Yeah, original Willy Wonka is crazy.
They fell into the river of chocolate, went up the tube. They're like, it's terrifying to watch.
Which film is this? Sorry, fans call me. I told them I was on the show. I had it. So, but which film were you talking about?
We're talking about the original Willy Wonka, where a lot of people said that that movie, even though it's not a horror movie, still gave them nightmares based on what happens to everyone.
Well, what's funny is that's not surprising. I mean, at first I didn't believe it but then there was a I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. You could watch this. What I'm about to say, it's on YouTube. There was a documentary that was made 20 years ago called The 100 Scariest Movie Moments. And really great documentary, by the way. I mean, it's not only, even though despite its title, not all the movies were horror films. They did focus on a few other genres, and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was one of them. And they actually do bring up some good points. I mean, they didn't really show like any scenes from the movie, but it was talked about. Despite, again, its name, not all the scenes, not every single movie scene they actually show, but they talk about it, though. And they mentioned two things. I mean, the thing about Willy Wonka is that it was written by Roald Dahl, who, of course, was known for writing some of the scariest stories ever. But if you look at a movie like that very carefully, it does kind of have a dark element when you really think about it, because you have this factory that's every child's dream of having your own chocolate factory. But if you think about it very carefully, that a lot of these kids are troublemakers. So in a way, it also punishes the kids for their deeds and what they've done to their parents. So there actually is kind of a punishment scenario in that movie.
Well, I find even if it's not a horror movie, there's still like scary factors. Even if you go to like Pee Wee Herman with Large Marge, and Home Alone with a guy that Macaulay Culkin thinks is the creepy guy, that or the furnace area, or even Brave Little Toaster for a cartoon with them just about dying, and Toy Story 3 with them falling into lava. There's always these scary moments for people that's not even horror movies.
And just last night, I mean, I was out with some friends last night. We were actually checking out some Halloween decorations of houses, but before we did that, we just went to like a Burger King for dinner. But they had a television there, and what was playing was, and I just, it's weird. It's like I remember seeing when I was very young, but it had been so many years, so I kind of forgotten about this movie. They were showing the original Hocus Pocus, and even that movie, when you watch it carefully, like especially the opening of it, is pretty dark. I mean, you not only have those witches who are hung, which usually is normally not allowed in a Disney movie, but the fact that
I couldn't imagine. I mean, that's the only And that's also what I compare a lot of things now when I say, when a lot of people assume if you have a gift into the supernatural, you must be doing witchcraft or whatever, especially back in the day. That's like the only thing I knew about witches was that Hocus Pocus movie, and I think the only reason why I was allowed to watch it was Disney. Like parents trust Disney so much.
Yep.
I guarantee if my parents would have watched Hocus Pocus, I would not have been allowed to watch Hocus Pocus. But because Disney made it, they're like, yeah, go ahead, watch Hocus Pocus.
It's
Well,
fine.
it's even more darker. I mean, not just like I just said, like the hanging sequence, but more importantly, they take the life force of a young girl, and yeah, it may not be graphic or anything, but that's probably one of the very few Disney movies where basically a kid was killed in that movie because they stole her life force to make her real. And I remember watching it, like the first time about 2 years ago, and I thought to myself, wow, this is really dark for I'm surprised Disney allowed this to like actually take part. So again, it seems like that regardless of what company it is, it sticks
definitely.
with you forever.
No, exactly. There's even if you go to like Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark with the melting face and
Emily said, is it raining? It is pouring. That flipping river ride scared. Oh, she's talking about the river ride from Willy Wonka.
Willy Wonka, yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I never thought about it until people pointed out that Willy Wonka is actually terrifying when you break it down.
Well, even Roger Rabbit, like
the
end scene there.
I had not seen that. I had not seen that movie for several years until
he has. I think you talk about the scene where he has like the shoe that's actually a cartoon character who's living, and he dunks it in acid.
Yeah,
kills it. And I'm like, this is dark for half cartoon.
Yes, exactly. Christopher, who is it?
Christopher
Lloyd, isn't it?
Yeah, no, not yeah. And when he's revealed to be the villain, Judge Doom, and he makes that horrible high-pitched scream. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, that is just so disturbing to hear from that. It's like I couldn't imagine what it probably would have been like when it first came out in theaters back in 1988. And the film was rated PG, so that meant kids were able to see it. Of course, it's kind of more adult theme when you look at it, but I can't imagine how much it must have scared the hell out of kids when it came out.
Well, they still use that scene for, I believe it's their horror nights where you see the villains, and you're seeing the villain, and you see that villain, and he has the shoe, and he has, of course, a fake acid can in front of him, and he does that in front of the kids, and I'm just like, why is this allowed?
Yeah, really. Emily also brought up another film. See, again, I'm trying to keep up with the comments that aren't showing up. She just also brought up another film. Funny enough, this too was even on this list I was telling you guys about, Wizard of Oz, even.
Oh, yeah.
Because
also have that.
Stuart Gordon, if you guys know who that is, famous. I know he passed away a few years ago, rest his soul, but he once said between Margaret Hamilton and those flying monkeys, and they said this is the type of film that has been known to cause more nightmares than any other film ever made. And it does, again, have kind of a very dark feel to it, because that classic scene of when the witch comes up and has the sand say, this is how much time you have left to live, and then flips it over. And I just think to myself, what's going to happen when that sand runs out? Is she going to come in, like slaughter her or something?
They still use flying monkeys and stuff in horror movies just because it's creepy.
She also just brought up, she's bringing up a lot of movies. Snow White or Alice in Wonderland. Can go on and on. So she actually said the tragedies behind Wizard of Oz and ties to Aleister Crowley is mind-blowing. Oh, I never even thought of that, actually.
Yeah, you can definitely dig deep into movies that are not horror movies that have a lot of scary moments. Disney had a lot of those back in the day too.
Yes, they did. They really did.
Or even if you want to go to the newer newer cartoons that are like Coraline and Paranorman.
And I just saw Coraline in the theater a few weeks ago. We saw it in 3D. And I just think to myself again, I mean, that was late early 2000s, but the fact that she's being threatened, she's got to sew her eyes for a
Yes.
PG movie, that's pretty gruesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Do you watch Nine too? That cartoon?
Not seen 9, but I've been meaning to.
I recommend checking that out. It's pretty dark too.
It's just amazing, like you just said, just the amount of films. And, not to mention that a lot of these movies, again, inspired, people to become filmmakers themselves. Because, Devon, I could actually share your passion because I've also worked on movies too myself. And that all stemmed from a lot of these type of movies back in the day.
I think, yeah, like watching them religiously, basically. That was like our weekend thing where we go rent a movie from the movie store. We'd watch it that weekend, have like a supper together with family. And that was like our weekend special, basically, sometimes, or rent video games.
Well, here's a question for you because I just thought of one myself. Was there any particular like horror film director that really inspired you to like follow in the line of horror films and wanting to work on movies?
It's changed over the years for sure. The one that stood out to me as a kid the most is a movie company more so, but Full Moon Pictures is one that stood out to me the most. I would turn the VHS cover over and see that Full Moon logo, and I was like, I need to rent this. Puppet Master was a huge influence on my childhood. I still have like Puppet Master dolls and action figures and all those guys. Charles Band. Charles Band was a huge influence for me when I was a kid. I was like, I want to make these kinds of films when I get older. Trauma Entertainment, even if you want to go to Lloyd Kaufman. I loved watching those. Even watching like Leprechaun, Jack Frost, Uncle Sam, Ticks with Clint Howard. I love those 90s, 80s B movies. And I'd say Full Moon Pictures was a huge part of my love for wanting to do filmmaking, Puppet Master series.
I grew up with Full Moon Pictures too. That used to air on. I don't know if you're familiar with this person, Svengoolie. You ever heard of him before? Or...
The name sounds familiar.
He is, well, for many years, he was just, because where I live, I actually live just 20 minutes outside of Chicago. So for many years, it was mainly just he was just more well known in the Chicago, Northern Illinois, and Southern Wisconsin area. But his show has become, I don't know if it's become international yet, but it has become national throughout the United States. So now a lot more people know who he is. And back in this show has been running since 1979. Yeah, although it was somebody else by the name of Jerry G. Bishop. He was the original show host, but sadly he passed away several years ago. But there was another show host by the name of Rich Coase who he took over the show in 1986. And at that time it was called Son of Svengoolie. As time went on, I guess he was old enough that they just revised the name Svengoolie by the mid-90s. And I still remember growing up, again, the early 2000s. And during that period, he used to show a lot of the Full Moon Pictures movies on his show. Not most of the movies he shows now. He still does a lot of films, but most of them are just a lot of the old-fashioned horror films, kind of the traditional like creature feature, like a lot of the classic horror movies from anywhere from the 30s to the 60s. But he has shown a few later movies too.
That's cool. It sounds kind of like Joe Bob Briggs or Elvira when she showed horror movies back in the day too.
Oh, and Svengoolie knows who Elvira is. I've actually seen them together at a horror film con. So they're awesome people.
And that's the thing too. I find I've been to horror conventions, and I would say most of the actors, directors, have been super nice, super friendly, down to earth, wanting to talk to their fans. They don't usually like usher them out of line. They don't like, hey, how's it going? Sign an autograph, get on my line. You actually get to talk to them more longer. Robert Englund and myself had a conversation for probably like 20 minutes or so. And he actually stood up, walked around his table, and like face-to-face conversation with me. And it was awesome. It was such a cool moment for me to have him do that. I met him many times, and he's always been so friendly to every single person. And he definitely loves Freddy Krueger characters so much.
I've met him too, so I know exactly how you feel.
It's wild. Like as a kid, you see these guys, and you're like, oh, I hope they're not jerks. I hope they're not this like egotistical. And yeah, Robert England's so nice. He just loves to talk to his fans, and you just see that passion of his character being Freddy Krueger. He did the laugh for every single person, I think, for photos. He made people help pose the people in the photos, and he had a blast doing it. It looked great.
Something about people who work in this genre are nicer than I've met people who do the Christian stuff in the genre. I'm not gonna mention any names. I've met them, or even like the self-help people, and they're really rude and really mean. They just don't want to deal with
I
anyone. I'm
know.
just like, and then you talk to horror people, and they're nicer, and then everyone's just like, you stereotypically you'd think it'd be reversed, but somehow it's not.
No, it's even the fans, like even like being at the horror conventions, they're pretty cool and pretty chill. They want to talk about everything. I don't think I've really had a bad experience meeting like these actors. Like I met some big names too, like Doug Bradley, Linda Blair,
Yes, yes, that's
and they're
awesome.
awesome people. Linda Blair, she was actually donating the money from her photos and autographs to her animal rescue place. And I'm like, that's so cool. And I told her what we do instead of current, and she's like loved it. So
I've met Linda Blair too. She's just as great, like you just said. Um, it's just amazing. Like, what's actually cool, like when I was just bringing up about this guy, Svengoolie, again, if you guys want to check, I know he's got some of his episodes like on YouTube you can check out, but what's really great is we've kind of, because I've met him several times. He's kind of, in a way, become a good friend of mine. Believe it or not, I've actually even tried offering about having him try to come on as a guest on one of these shows. But of course, obviously, since he's doing a major TV show, it's very difficult for him to do so.
squeeze in
Maybe,
there.
maybe sometime down the line, but right now he had to decline the offer. But so he knows exactly who I am, and we've actually done this special photo tradition because it started when I was in high school, where we got a picture. First time I ever met him, I was like maybe 12. So we got a picture at that time. Then a few years later, by the time I was like 15, we had this really cool idea where we took the photo that we had of him from a few years ago, and it was already signed by him, and we took the picture holding that one. And before you know, we started this tradition where we did this picture within a picture within a picture thing. And I did not know when to expect this, but one of those pictures later ended up on a show. And it's so awesome to watch. And thankfully, I downloaded that clip because it was later deleted on YouTube. So I was able to save it very quickly. But I just loved how he says, Nick is in pictures of Sven, in pictures of Sven, in pictures of Sven. So
That's
it's
awesome.
experiences like this at horror film cons, like where you start creating these friendships and they know who you are. It's even more mind blowing, and it's a great feeling.
That's cool. That's like a photo inception type. I like that idea. No, it's cool.
You check out the comments too, just see who's all watching.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to keep up with all of them. It's there's a lot coming in. Hey,
yeah, I met Stuart Gordon actually a couple of years ago, and super nice dude. He was very quiet at the start, but then I mentioned how much Dolls, his movie Dolls, was a huge influence for me, and the acting in Dolls was awesome. And then he like perked the way up, and he was so happy to talk about Dolls. His wife was there with him too. She was in Dolls, and she was happy hearing that as well. And I met Jeffrey Combs. The one guy I really want to meet one day, I'm hoping one day, is Brad Dwarf, the Joyce of Chucky. I heard he's a super nice guy too.
You know, he actually has a Facebook, right?
Brad?
Yeah, he does. I think
Oh, no.
Last time I checked, I was friends with him on Facebook.
Oh, damn. No, I did not know that.
Yeah. I think he loves his fans so much that he's willing to even have a Facebook account to keep contact with some of his fans. I haven't spoken to him personally yet, but I know I'm friends with him on Facebook.
Oh, that's cool. I even like Yeah, it's neat. I love that they love their fans. You can tell
Yeah.
that they actually appreciate their fans. Like Bill Moseley, I met at the convention as well. That guy who played Otis or Chop Top from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2,
Yep.
and is awesome because he is wearing ripped jeans, a Misfit shirt, and he's walking around the convention eating popcorn, and he just had like a fun time. He's just like a casual horror fan, basically looked like.
Here's something else that Emily just said. First off, Joe was also watching, so I just want to give a quick shout out to Joe. She also asked, you all know about Saturday Night Nightmares? That used to happen on US back in the 80s and early 90s. I don't remember that one, but do you guys remember?
Saturday Nightmares.
Apparently, Freddy was on Saturday Night Nightmares. Watch one clip of him in a dollhouse and can never watch it again.
Doesn't ring a bell, that one.
Said never watched a Freddy film since something about attacking people in their dreams freaks me out. See the drama of the Freddy house on TikTok. Never knew anything about that. She just also mentioned about dolls. Dolls should be a red flag no matter what. That freaks me out.
Oh, dead silence for me because
Yes.
I can't do dolls either.
Then he introduced Mary Shaw with the dolls, and
Yes.
yeah, that movie I loved. I don't know. I'm a sucker for doll movies. I don't know why, but if you bring a doll movie out there, I will definitely watch it. Pup Master dolls, Demonic Toys, Doll Man, all great stuff.
You know, I kind of wish for Dead Silence they could, because I don't know if you know, it had a different title originally, which I think it actually would have been more creepier, the original title, because it's all about not screaming when you're around Mary Shaw's ghost. But the original title of that movie was Shh.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm not. I think I actually don't mind the Dead Silence title.
Yeah. I just think
that.
yeah, I think it just sounds more. It just sounds more
funny.
creepy. But I don't mind Dead Silence. And they were supposed to make a sequel to Dead Silence, but unfortunately, because of the poor reviews, the sequel never got made, which I thought was very unfortunate.
It does. It did. It's one of those movies that should deserve a sequel, I think.
Well, they left it open to have it with that being the puppet at the end. So.
Well, not only that, it even had because again, it was done by the same director who did Saw, James Wan. And if you look careful, if there's Emily now, we can see her. If you look very carefully, I know Billy the puppet actually makes a brief cameo appearance, like in the background. You ever noticed? And I'm thinking to myself, is this like somehow supposed to be like in the same universe as the Saw films? Because he's obviously shown up, and I thought that was pretty cool.
They're making another Saw movie.
I love when they do like that for Easter eggs. Even if you went back to like the Evil Dead, the first original, they had a reference to Freddy in there. And then if you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, they had a reference to a horror movie as well, right? I love that they do cross promotions and they kind of like little love for each person.
What's funny is I'll bring this up real quick, since I don't know now he's still watching, but he's done some podcasts too. And what's really cool, he did this with a show host of his from Florida called Dom and Tom's World. They actually had two of the actresses from Evil Dead. They had
that's awesome.
Yeah, they had the girlfriend of Bruce Campbell's character on, and then the I forgot what her name was. She was the one who like burns in the fireplace. And then so they had them both on, and Tom and Dom were asking for one request for the actress, the character, Bruce Campbell's girlfriend's character, if she could still make that very unsettling, creepy laugh. And she did it. It was like, oh my God, she still has it after all these years. It was awesome. She still can do it.
Evil Dead was another one that stood out to me a lot as a kid. I remember discovering that at a video store on VHS. I seen Evil Dead. I was like, what is this? I have to rent it. So we rented it, and we were like blown away how creepy the cellar scene was, all the deadites. I was like, this is phenomenal. This is like the greatest horror movie. And And then we found out Evil Dead 2 existed. I was like, really? Oh, so we went back to the video store, rented Evil Dead 2, watched that one. We're like, this is even better. This has a bigger budget and it's even more
funny in the
fun.
sequel.
And then we found out Army of Darkness was tied into all this. I was like, oh, so we have to rent that one too. So we went back and rented another movie.
See, in Army of Darkness, that is one of my all-time favorites. It is so damn not only creepy, but it's so damn funny at the same time. I could watch it over and over again if I wanted to.
That one, I found Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness made like the Bruce Campbell character of Ash. Like they actually gave him like the personality, the one-liners, the goofball character. Yeah, the Jim Carrey type vibes there.
Yeah, those are also some of my favorites still.
No, I love Evil Dead. I'll watch pretty much any horror movie. Even if they make Saw 20, I will probably watch Saw 20.
They probably will be making Saw 20 because now they're starting to make more. So maybe one day we'll see Saw 50. Who knows?
I'm surprised they haven't made it since now this year marks Saw's 20th anniversary. You would have
Which is
thought by now we
wild.
would have had our Saw 20 already.
They were going that way. Like every year they were releasing Saw. And then I think the last few were kind of starting to die down for box office numbers. So they gave a little bit of break for the Saw series, which I don't mind. I like when they give a series a little bit of a break, so you love it. You're like, I want more of that. Like Final Destination is coming back next year, and
Oh, really?
I'm pumped because it's been a few years since the last one. So I was like, I'm down for more.
Wonder if they'll get Tony Todd. You know,
I hope so.
Now that would be cool if they could.
I love Tony Todd. He's awesome.
And I've met him too. I don't know if you have.
He's super nice too.
One thing I just can't think. I mean, the one thing I just couldn't help but notice. Great guy. Holy cow, is he huge? I mean, I'm pretty tall myself. I'm about 6'1", 6'2". This thing, I mean, he had to be about 6.5 feet tall. He towered over me.
Oh, I when I shook his hand pretty much wrapped around my hand. I was like, holy moly. And I love his voice. Such a unique voice and
that wonderful voice he's got. Like you just know it's him right at the start.
Exactly. And he also loved his fans. Like he had a lot of like Star Trek fans, and then he had a lot of Candyman fans. So it's cool to see the sci-fi and the horror fans come out to meet Tony Todd.
Absolutely.
Is that the Gorfers t-shirt that you're wearing?
So this is basically our logo of Dead Prairies Productions. And it is our mascot, basically a zombie gopher. My tattoo artist actually made the design, and all I told him to do is like, I want like a zombie gopher, but like Evil Dead inspired, basically with a chainsaw. So then he made the whole gopher chainsaw going through rib cage, kind of like Ash from Evil Dead. So my artist did an awesome job. And it stands out. People love the logo all the time when I go in public. They're like, that's a cool logo. I'm like, yeah, my artist made it. He's a very talented dude. And we didn't even make Gorfers until 2015 is when we made the zombie gopher movie. And it didn't do that great at the start. And a few years later, we made Gorfers 2 in 2018. And that one did okay. And then for some reason around 2019, 2020 is when people started buying the Gorfers movie and started buying it from US and showcasing it, talk about it on podcasts. I was like, what happened? I'm like, what? Why did people all of a sudden like get this whole Gorfer craze? And I'm like, this is awesome. So it became one of our biggest franchise, I'd say.
Some of these smallest budget movies are actually really good. We can say that with Japan, so that's when I see like smaller productions like yours, we want to showcase it because when it comes to horror movies, Japan, that's one thing Japan does not play around with. Horror movies. They love horror movies. So if there is a horror, and that's one thing I've also learned. If there is any horror movie, if Japan did it and the United States redid it, even though United States might have had more of a budget, something about the Japanese version is just creepier to watch.
More
because it doesn't matter
realistic,
the
right?
budget. They make
That's
sure
exactly
it's
what I
not to
was.
play around with.
That's
Yeah, there is.
exactly The Grudge. Yep, and
Yeah,
that's
the Japanese version is definitely creepier, but there's also another movie that I used to have a roommate who was more into the Japanese versions of the scary movies, and I understand once you start watching the Japanese versions, you'd be like, yeah, this is so much better than the overly budgeted one in the United States. It's just that's the one thing Japan, like I said, will not mess around with when it comes to scary stories.
they undoubtedly.
It's they're in a league of their own. Like scary
Yeah.
stories, urban legends. Because majority of the scary movies here was once either a ghost story here or an urban legend. There's literally thousands of urban legends and ghost stories in Japan. So they just able to make a lot of horror movies off of it. And it's like I said, it's league of its own because horror movies, urban legends, I don't think they consider them really part of the paranormal like we would, Nick. Like, I know
Yeah,
you think urban legends, that's obviously goes hand in hand with the paranormal. To them, it's more storytelling. So they create it more, so they're able to tell the stories more of the art, which obviously comes forward in their movies.
very much so. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, and I probably have said this to you before, Amanda, that Japan undoubtedly, well, not just only Japan, a lot of the other Asian countries, they probably make really some of the scariest movies that could ever be made because they are just like you said, Devin. They're just so more more realistic and just so unsettling. And what's interesting, I'll just throw this out real quick with what Emily just said, is especially with The Grudge, because funny enough, I seen part of the American remake of The Grudge back when it was in theaters. However, I think it scared me so bad I ended up staying no more than 20 minutes, and I just had to go because it was just too much. I was only just 11 years old at the time, so you can imagine it freaked me out. But what's really interesting about a movie like The Grudge was that The Grudge, at least the American version, that was actually the first ever horror film to have the original Japanese director who did the original film to do the American one. Because before that, no other movie like that had ever had the same director in this case. And I thought that was really well done.
No, that's I don't know. Like I like foreign horror films quite a bit, like Spanish and French ones as well.
Yeah.
I one I'll definitely say right out now is Wreck.
Right. Oh my God! If you guys talk to my friend Don, who runs Fearfans, that's like one of his favorite movies, the original one from Spain.
So good. It's a Spanish horror film, and then I remember when they released the Quarantine in America.
Yep.
And it's basically a copy and paste, like scene by scene, basically. And it just didn't have the same gritty vibes to it. And I remember when I watched Wreck first time, there's a certain scene with the staircase. I was just about falling asleep because not much was happening at the start. And then the body came flying down the staircase and it woke me up because it was like a big thud. I was like, holy smokes. And then I was like, attention on that movie after that scene. And I went to theaters, watched Quarantine. I was like, this is pretty copy and paste Wreck. And yeah.
To answer Emily's question, yes, it was, Emily. It was Ringu from 1999.
Definitely, if you want something creepier than a ring, that would be the version you'd want to watch then. Because a lot of
Robert.
people whose favorite movie is The Ring say they still prefer the Japanese version.
Oh yeah, Robert Hanna, who's watching again, just trying to keep up with the shout outs. He just mentioned another film, The Wailing. It's a great Japanese horror film. I don't know if you guys have heard of that one before.
I've heard of it. I've never watched it yet.
Just to give more shout outs, hello, Aiden Quinn, Gary Fields, and he also just mentioned Train to Busan, I guess, if I'm saying that correctly. It's not a Japanese film, but it's a Korean zombie film that they're making an American version into as well. That's the same thing too. And even in South Korea, they make some really good horror films there.
That movie is wild. That was a really good zombie film. I recommend checking that one out for anybody listening.
Honestly, I think the one Japanese horror film that really got me, and here's the funny thing, my parents initially forbidden me to see this, but I ended up seeing it anyway, just when they were sleeping, that is. And this was made about 25 years ago now. And again, American version remake is supposed to be made on this too. that had to it has stuck to me for so many years, and that undoubtedly had to be Audition.
Oh yeah.
That movie was, oh my god, it was just, it kind of set me back from wanting to go out on dates for a while, that's for sure. Because it wasn't just like your typical slasher film, or like it didn't have really anything supernatural in it. It was kind of more of a torture film, if anything, but it scared me so bad. It was horrible.
No, that one stands out quite well too. Like that's a big popular film for Japan.
A lot of the well-known filmmakers, again, that was featured on that list. A lot of the famous directors said that they found that movie so deeply disturbing, and I'm definitely with them on this, that I found it so creepy I didn't like it. That's how, I mean, they even said the last 15 minutes of that movie, you can't even look at the screen.
Yeah, it's I wish horror movies would terrify me or give me some sort of like a adrenaline. I remember Chucky's the only one that scared me as a kid, and I just never had that same vibe since. I think Chucky, just because the doll spoke without the batteries in it, and as a kid, I was like, that's not right. And it's weird because I got over that fear because Bride Chucky came out in the late 90s, and I seen the trailers when watching WWE Raw or WWF Raw, I guess you want to call it back then. And it kept showing commercials for Bride Chucky, and I was like, "Oh, I have to go to theaters for this. I need to go conquer my fear of Chucky." So me, my brother, and my dad would go to the theater for Bride Chucky, and I was scared when I walked in that theater. I was like, "Oh, this is the first time watching a full-length Chucky film. This is gonna be interesting." I'm in the theater with surround sound, big screen, people around. And I was able to watch the whole movie without freaking out. And after that, I was like, Chucky's actually kind of funny and he's not that scary. So then I convinced my dad to go rent all the Child's Plays and watch them with me after watching Bride Chucky.
People used to say that Furbies back in the day, that's why a lot of Furbies scared people. Not only did Furbies
Old Furbies.
go
Yeah.
off on their own, but people said like they got so tired of their Furby just randomly going off in the middle of the night, they took the batteries out, and they would still be going off.
Yes,
And that's why Furbies give a lot of people nightmares. Like, you take the batteries out, it still doesn't stop them.
yeah. I've seen a lot of like videos of that, and it makes me laugh because I grew up with the Furbies too, and yeah.
Me too.
WF trivia, that's awesome. Yeah, I was a wrestling nerd. I'd watch WCW, WWF. I loved watching. I'd flip back and forth between WCW and WWF quite a bit because I didn't know what one to watch. I liked the whole Hart Foundation. I liked the NWO, so it was definitely a challenge for me to watch both sometimes.
Also, just to respond quickly to Emily, if you're gonna watch Audition, you are in for quite a ride. Just gonna tell you that right now. You have no idea what you're gonna be expecting. Robert also said too, just to throw this out again, keeping up with the comments. Not surprisingly, of course, he said Chucky's based off of Robert the Doll, which I already knew that, but it's always fascinating to hear that it's based off of a real possessed doll.
Oh yeah, I find a lot of like the old horror movies are influenced by something. Even like Wes Craven was influenced for Freddy Krueger because he's seen some guy outside of his window with wearing a hat and he looked very creepy. So he based him off this guy. I don't know the full story, but I remember hearing that. Like, that's interesting how people get influenced by just seeing something from their past or a dream or whatever.
Well, actually, this is something a lot of people don't know about with like a movie like Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, like with the deaths that occurred in dreams. And Amanda, you probably may have never heard of this, so I'll throw this out. There actually was a series of cases, and here's the craziest thing.
I remember reading about that. That's actually how they came up with the movie. Is there was that people were seeing him in their sleep, and they eventually died in their sleep, which made people believe.
Well, not only that, it was happening mostly in a lot of Asian communities, but for some reason whatsoever, the primary area actually happened here in Chicago, and it was always the same thing. It only happened to men, and it was relatively young guys too, like in their 30s. And although it was the Chicago area was the primary spot where a lot of these, I guess you can kind of say, these nightmare deaths occurred, but it had been reported in many of the other Asian countries, including Japan. But strangely, it has not yet been reported like in other countries like Cambodia or China. But it has occurred. But I know it just happened in Japan, and that's all served as an inspiration for Nightmare on Elm Street. And even to this day, there's still been a few unexplained reports of it. But it's always the same thing happening to young men, like in their late 20s, 30s, or early 40s.
Yeah, that's cool. I watched like the Nightmare on Elm Street documentary. It's like a long one if you ever want to see a documentary of each single Nightmare on Elm Street movie. They go in the full details of each one and how some of the backstage, behind the scenes experience and the stuff that could go wrong in the movies. They did one for Friday 13th as well called Camp Crystal Lake, I believe. And it's like a long documentary. It's like hours, but it's cool watching like stuff that happens behind the scenes too.
Emily
That
could tell you about
story,
that.
yeah. So Camp Crystal Lake, that I used to live in Montana for a few years in Billings. And about an hour and a half away was what was where Camp Crystal Lake was based off of. It was a story that Hollywood kind of took, where at that camp, someone that there was a camper who drowned, and his mom went crazy because of it, which led to Hollywood making the Friday the 13th movies.
Interesting.
Yep, there is a Friday the 13th coming up in December. And yeah, Emily did find a story that, again, she could tell you about it better than I could, involving actually, again, some unsolved murder cases that occurred in a campsite. I think it was back in the late 70s. It was either in the somewhere in the 70s. And I think that also served as a partial inspiration for Friday the 13th.
I did not know there was a Friday 13th in December. That's cool to know.
How's that for a little Nightmare Before Christmas?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yep, it was Girl Scouts. That's what it was. Thank you, Emily.
That's interesting.
Well, Chrissy and Robert Hanna just said he thinks Wes Craven's New Nightmare was great.
New Nightmare. I remember hating it as a kid because it just did not have that same vibes as Nightmare on Elm Street. But then when I became an adult, I watched it again. I was like, this is a really cool concept. I like it. It is different. It grew on me a lot. But I remember as a kid, I was very disappointed because I was like, this is not my Freddy that I grew up watching. And where is he? Why is he like not appearing? And he's more serious. So like I loved New Nightmare once I became adult. And that happens a lot with some horror movies where as a kid you watch it, you're like, eh. And then you become adult, you watch it again, you're like, this movie's awesome.
Emily was born on Friday the 13th. That's awesome. That's amazing.
That's sweet. That's a cool date to have. That and born on Halloween is cool too.
Yeah.
Well, here's another question, and this is involving your film company, Devon. Is so like since you started this company, like how many movies have you guys made so far in these last couple of years?
So we are working on our 17th film. We haven't released a 16th film yet on DVD. We've been doing showings in different cities for Gorfer's Final Gnaw, it's called. We have shown it in Regina. We are showing it in Medicine Hat, Saskatoon, is in Toronto in September. And the original Gorfer's movie is going to Australia in November, which is mind-blowing. That's don't understand how, but I'll take it. That's awesome to me. And it's going to be an actual movie theater too. It's going to be at the back lot in Australia. And they're going to be showing it in front of 100 Acres, I think it's called. It's a horror film there. And it's shocking. I don't know. Our $100 budget film is going to Australia in front of an audience in a movie theater.
That's fantastic. That really is.
And we actually shipped the killer balloon to Japan a few years back. And The shipping was wild. How much it cost to ship the DVD to Japan. The guy discovered us on Instagram because we had Killer in the title, and he somehow discovered Killer Balloon on Instagram, and he's like, "Can I buy this movie?" And I was like, "Yeah, for sure." Like, shipping's gonna be probably bad, but I'll definitely get out to you guys. Shipped to Japan. Took a while to get to him. He watched it. He actually reviewed it on Twitter or or X, where you want to call it, and he gave a really good review, and he loved it. And I'm like, "That's so cool." And he wanted, he jokingly, I think his joke, he's like, "Yeah, you should come to Japan and remake it." And I'm like, "Yeah, if you pay for my flight, I'll definitely come out there and I'll remake it."
Yeah, hopefully one day you do get to come to Japan and make one. Like I was saying earlier, when it comes to horror movies, Japan does not mess around.
Oh, I love to film in different locations. This year's been really big for us expanding and showing events in different places and not just Swift Current. We're helping out animal shelters in different cities now. We're getting recognition for what we do, and just for a $100 to $200 budget films, I think they're doing quite well.
And like you guys said earlier, I mean, it's always the low budget ones that always usually will have the most success out of it because the way how they're really done. And, even for, so like budgets like that, it's got to be, even though it's low budget, it's still great to make a movie just like that because that's kind of like your classic, typical horror film that would be made under that kind of budget.
Oh, yeah. $200 is like, I have to be very creative. I have to like find stuff in my house. I have to go to like a dollar store or thrift shopping and try to combine stuff together. Or I go on Facebook sometimes saying, "Hey, does anybody have a lawnmower? Do they have a barbecue or anything they want to give away? I want to use this for a prop for a movie." You might not get it back because it's going to be bloody and destroyed after, but
You're not gonna want it back, so.
You just brought back a memory of another horror film that obviously for one scene used a lawnmower. I'm sure you know this one, Sinister.
Yes.
oh, I thought you were going to say Dead Alive. I was like,
oh, Dead Alive is another. Oh my God, I love that movie.
as soon as I think Lawnmower, I think Dead Alive, and that's the first time I've ever had somebody say Sinister over Dead Alive.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've seen Dead Alive. That's like one of my favorite splatter movies. It's so gory, but it was so funny at the same time.
And it's cool because Peter Jackson did it, and a lot of people don't realize that Peter Jackson did a lot of horror movies before he did like Lord of the Rings and Frighteners and all the bigger productions, right? And he did these low budget horror films with his friends, basically.
Yeah, it's just amazing when it comes to certain directors like who become like these big, like you just said, Peter Jackson, who's now like considered one of the greatest directors in the world. And just the amount of work that he's put in, again, like with these much larger budgets, like films like Lord of the Rings and stuff. But for him to start off with movies like this, you would never think twice it was done by the same director.
Exactly. Like, even if you look at Sam Raimi, even like he started off with Evil Dead, and that was basically his friends too. And he became a huge director with the Spider-Man series.
Spider-Man movies, and he just recently did what was that from like a year or two ago? It was a Marvel movie that he did. I already forgot. I forgot the name of it.
Doctor Strange.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm pretty sure it's Doctor Strange.
Yeah, it was Doctor Strange. And what's even funny is that in one scene of the movie, even Bruce Campbell is featuring it. So it's like it's not a horror movie, but they still pay homage. It was a way to pay homage to the Evil Dead franchise. And Bruce Campbell, although he's older now, he still has it after all these years.
Yeah, it's cool that he like throws Bruce Campbell into like, his movies, no matter what. Basically, he'll have a guest appearance or a cameo, basically. And
Spider-Man was the same thing. He makes a few cameo appearances in Spider-Man.
Oh, I was stoked whenever I seen Bruce Campbell in Spider-Man movies. I was like, this is awesome. And there's another thing, like Spider-Man 2. I forgot when Dr. Octopus kills all those scientists. how dark that scene was.
Yeah.
And how like it reminded me of like Evil Dead. And it's weird watching this superhero movie and then watching this. I was like, this is like a horror film.
Yeah, and that's like, what is it, PG or PG-13 when it came?
Yeah. And that's designed for like kids more, right?
Yeah. I remember watching that the first time. I mean, unfortunately, the first time I watched it, we saw it in one of those buses, like when you have the small screens in front of you, if you know what I'm talking about, those type of buses.
Yeah.
Well, it was hard for me to watch it, obviously, because I was on a bus with because I was a kid then, so I was with other kids. But I do remember taking a few seconds to I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is going on in this? This is horrifying. I'm thinking, are we watching? I was even thinking to myself, are we still watching Spider-Man, or are we watching something else now? Because sure as hell doesn't look like it anymore.
You definitely could tell it is a big influence from Sam Raimi for that scene.
Yeah, definitely.
Hi, Barry.
Look how well the Paranormal Activity franchise did. That first movie, their first budget was only $3,000, and they made so much money off of that.
Oh, I'm not a huge fan of Paranormal Activity movies, but I give them mad respect for what they did and what they accomplished, and I think that's great for independent horror movies too.
Yeah.
Whenever I see independent horror movies do well, I love it. I think that's great to see, and that opens up even more doors for people. Even if you want to go to like Blair Witch, that Blair Witch paved a lot of doors for people. I think
too. When that movie first came out, it was terrifying to so many people because they thought it was real.
Yeah,
they thought it was
like
actual. The way it was filmed, they thought it was actual footage.
I liked it. I liked how I like how people thought it was real. Like I knew it was fake. Like
me trying to tell everyone that movie is fake, no one believed me because they're like, no, the way it's clearly real. I'm like, it's not. It's just a movie.
I still remember when that came out, and again, I was even younger then, and to me, it was like it was that type of movie because again, back in '99, I was only like 5 or 6 years old, so as I would probably, I mean, so understandably, I was too young to see it then, but it was the type of film that it's like your friends' older brothers or sisters may have seen at the theater. You weren't old enough to see it yourself, but you just knew how notorious this movie was and the conversations that erupted about it. I still remember people saying they thought it was a real movie.
Just how it was shot, and it was shot differently compared to most horror movies in that generation. It's funny because I remember people thought it was real when I was in school. I was in school. People were like, this is real. Everybody's freaked out by the Blair Witch and the symbols and all that, the tree symbols. So then me and my brother decided to make the symbols from the movie and then put it in our park down near our playgrounds. We'd hang these symbols in the trees. I'm not sure if anybody discovered them, but I think it's funny.
One thing that made that movie realistic is the reactions from the people. And they said when they hired the actors, they told them absolutely nothing about the movie. So anything they did, the actors didn't know what was going to happen next. So like all the weird noises they heard at night, obviously it was the film crew with them, but they're the ones making noises, so they don't know what to expect. That's why it's also more realistic.
I like that. Like I miss horror movies like that too. Like where they don't tell everything. Even if you watch like The Descent with the girls going in the cave, they didn't even show the girls the monster at the start. So that whole scene was kind of like just another big shocker to them.
That's another greatly well, because it really takes its time. The Descent does not start off really violently, other than the car accident scene, but doesn't start off with those creatures. It slowly gets there. And that's what I think is really well done with it. That movie scared the hell out of me.
It's one of my favorite horror movies, I'd say, for sure. It's in my top 5, I'd say, for horror movies.
See, and another thing, too, since we just talked about Blair Witch, and I just looked to remember the name of it. everybody also thinks that Blair Witch Project was the first found footage horror movie, and that's not actually the case. There was a movie that was released just the year before in 1998 that was called The Last Broadcast. And I actually have not seen that one, but I have heard of it. What's interesting about it is that even though I haven't seen it, they actually look for something. It's a very similar plot line, except instead of searching for the Blair Witch, they actually search for a well-known mythical cryptid, and it's searching for the Jersey Devil in New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
And but there is one final film though that was made long before these two movies were made, and it's an extremely violent movie. I'll never watch it again because it's not only just violent, but it's just too upsetting at the same time. It's been banned in a lot of theaters when it first came out in the early 80s. Cannibal Holocaust. That movie it's sick to my stomach, but it did incorporate and inspire that found footage genre.
I was going to say, I was actually going to bring up Cannibal Holocaust because you're mentioning how they weren't telling the actors for Blair Witch, the sounds and all that. This guy he went to court because he thought they killed the actors. Yeah. And
I remember reading about that.
Wild.
He made it so realistic, they assumed he actually did.
Well, he was charged with murder, and he had to go to court, and he was forced to reveal the special effects that they used. And it was only after when he because what the intention was he wanted the actors to literally disappear for a while. Don't take another part in any other movies. Don't take part in commercials. Don't even do voice acting or anything. You guys disappear for a while. But it was only after when Italian director Ruggero Deodato brought him onto a local television station that the charges were dropped. But he was still, however, charged, and this is the part that's upsetting, with animal cruelty, because unfortunately the animal killings were real, and it's horrifying and devastating to watch. So it made me sick to my stomach watching. And the funny thing is, I actually had the opportunity of meeting Ruggero Deodato at a horror film convention over 15 years ago. I didn't know what to expect from him, honestly. And at that time, I was only 16 years old, and I saw an interview of him the night before. And my first problem was he spoke mainly Italian. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, geez, how am I going to be able to talk to this guy if he doesn't really speak English? But when I got to see him, he did speak English, but with a very heavy Italian accent. And there was a number of things he had about Cannibal Holocaust that I didn't even know about. It was mind-blowing.
That's cool. That's why I like meeting these guys too. They tell you stories that you might not hear in interviews or YouTube or on behind the scenes stuff. Like, I learned a lot of stuff that it might have been on the YouTube, but this is cool. Like, I met Dee Wallace Stone even, and she brought up a story about Drew Barrymore on E.T.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's like, Drew Barrymore was freaking out, crying for real because she saw E.T. was real and dying on that table, and she was not. Yeah, she was definitely traumatized a bit there.
Well, in the case like with Ruggero Deodato in this case, I mean, I even heard from the former cast members that, you make these movies and usually it's supposed to be a lot of fun. But from what I've heard is a lot of the actors that worked on that movie, they did not it was not a good time for them. They were not having the great of thrills as you would probably imagine. And even Ruggero Deodato, honestly, he was really not that nice of a guy. Like when he was a director and he was making that movie, and because he was just pushing to the limit and stuff. But I know he passed away a couple of years ago, but before he died, he actually did say that years later, yes, he was kind of a jerk, but years later, he said he actually regretted making that movie. He wished that movie never could be made. And honestly, even though he was a nice guy when I met him, it just felt so surreal being around the guy that made literally one of the most controversial movies ever made. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's true. Like even if you go look at Stanley Kubrick for The Shining, look at how much torture he did to what's her name there?
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yep.
Oh my god, I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, I know.
Shelley Duvall. Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall. That's who it is. Yeah.
He put her through hell. Like, he traumatized her so much. And he made her do the scenes over and over and over. And yeah, the movie is looked upon as a great movie, but yeah, he did a lot of crappy things, I think, to the female.
Well, and cannibal, again, one final fact about Cannibal Holocaust, those animal killings, a lot of those actors could not do it themselves. They had to get doubles to do it because there was no way that they were going to commit that type of act because that wasn't in them, obviously. No actor shouldn't have to do something like that.
No, I even hate when animals die in the movies that are fake, and I'm like, oh no. Even like Hills Have Eyes, when the one German Shepherd there died, I was like, oh. And then the other German Shepherd got his revenge, which I was so happy to see that German Shepherd kill those the bad guys.
Another Hills of Eyes. That's another classic one. Also from Wes Craven, the original one, that is.
Yeah, it's I actually did not mind the remake.
Remake was good.
I like Alex Hajar. I think he's a good director. He did High Tension. He's did Hills Have Eyes. He did Crawl. And I recommend High Tension too if you're into like the foreign horror films. It was a really mind trip.
And it's even crazier too that who am I thinking of? See, I'm actually looking her up right now just so I can remember the name. It's even more crazy to think too that even Vanessa Shaw was in the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, which just again like 12, like just almost a decade earlier, again was also in Hocus Pocus as the high school girl. It's just funny to think where you see these actors when they were kids, they're in these innocent movies, and then they star in these gruesome films like Hills Have Eyes, and it's funny where sometimes the careers take them.
Oh,
sometimes they do that though, because they say that once you do one part, you're kind of stuck and labeled that. So they try to go to extreme to do the exact opposite to try and get out of that genre from that first part. Because unfortunately, like I said, it sticks with them. So once you play that first part, it's going to stick with you, and that's mostly the parts you're going to get after.
Emily brought up reminds her of Wrong Turn. I remember Wrong Turn.
Yeah, Wrong Turn. I actually didn't mind the first Wrong Turn. I liked it. And then they did, I don't know, 5 or 6 more after, I think it was.
They did a whole bunch of them. And, here's another trivia fact for you guys. Believe it or not, that actually is kind of based off, not necessarily true events, but it is based off of something that I've done research on. Again, based on they're actually considered a cryptid, but it's probably the closest you can ever get to like real mutants, if you will, something known as the Melonheads. And funny name, but the encounters I heard are said to be terrifying. And they kind of basically served as an inspiration for a lot of these mutant humanoid cannibalistic creatures. The only difference, however, though, in this case with the hills out in the desert, Emily, she lives in Appalachia. She lives in Kentucky. The only difference is that the Melonhead stories are more revolved around the forests than Hills of Eyes, which is in the desert. Although Wrong Turn probably takes a more closer approach because that's in the backwoods area. And it's an interesting story. It's kind of one of those more cryptid stories that not many people are very familiar with, but people said they've actually seen these things, and supposedly these creatures are cannibalistic. They're like these inbred, deformed, large humanoid creatures.
No, Hills Have Eyes. They did come out and say it was based off of an actual family, which is terrifying to think.
Well, to just keeping it real short, I mean, the only difference of the Melonhead story is that they're, it started actually in Ohio, but supposedly they were, 2 stories basically go out the most. Both of them starred Dr. Crow. One version was that he was working for the government and was experimenting with radiation, either working during either the Civil War or late 1800s, early 1900s, or even working during World War I, Great Depression, or World War II. It varies basically. And his family, his children were all born mutated. His wife became very ill. The government did a cover up, gave him this nice piece of land out in Chardon, and said, hey, please keep quiet about this. Now, the second one is a little bit more sinister, but it's also the most notorious version. Dr. Crow, again, but this time he was running an orphanage or a hospital, and he was experimenting on children, though, including those who had hydrocephalus, water in the brain. And these were vicious experiments, atrocities. And he would end up creating, like, some of these kids died as a result, but he also ended up creating a bunch, or a tribe, if you will, of these kids that were horribly deformed with these incredibly large heads. And they were almost feral, if you will. And the story goes, again, keeping it short, that eventually the kids turn on Dr. Crow. They murder him, brutally, and set the entire building on fire. And they all escaped into the woods. And although we don't really know for sure, but it's not just only specifically just to Ohio, because as time went on, some of these individuals decided to leave the area just so they could get away from there. And as a result, not only are we still getting reports and sightings of these creatures in Ohio to this day, but we also began getting reports and sightings of these creatures from the 1940s on in Michigan, Florida, Maine, North Carolina, and Connecticut especially. So that's what kind of served as the Hills Have Eyes.
Okay, I did not know that.
We have I can't remember the name of this movie. And I asked you about it once before, Nick, and now I'm upset with myself. I can't remember the name of this movie, but we have here in Japan. It's actually just about 2 hours north of me. There is a town, and there is a horror movie kind of based off of the same thing. And I know there's probably another town like this in America, but there's literally a town in the mountains, in the woods, and it literally, when it was inhabited, there is a sign outside of that little town that says Japanese constitution, or basically Japanese law beyond this point, does not exist.
Oh, really?
Yes. And it was a town. It was the outlaws, where they didn't want to live, they didn't want Japanese law. So that's why they moved into the mountains, into the forest. They posted that sign where literally anything and everything you could think of happened. And there was a horror movie I've seen that was basically like that, where it was visitors who got stuck in that town, even though they were warned to leave, but they end up taking a hike in the woods, and they came across and they were taken into a little village in the woods, similar to what we had what we actually had here. Obviously now it's deserted.
So this is basically like one of those areas where it's like they're their own society. They
They
live
were
by
their
their
own
own.
society. They had their own rules. Well, they didn't have rules, because there's signs warning you. So, yep.
That's the
Past
same
that
thing with.
point,
Yeah, that's like
past
you're
that,
dead.
yeah, past that point, anything they wanted to do happened.
It's the same thing basically with the Melonhead stories, like, because they said that after, when they escaped from the asylum, rather than knowing that they would be caught, they knew that they wouldn't get the justice that they deserve. So rather than return to society, they started forming their own area, if you will. And because of that's the scariest thing. I mean, if you think about like both these areas, including this one you were talking about, Amanda, despite the fact that these Melonhead creatures are considered cryptids, the scariest thing about them, I think, more than anything else, is, unlike many of the other cryptids, is that if you saw one of these creatures, even under their horrific disfigurements and deformities, you could tell that they weren't, basically they weren't really monsters to begin with. If you saw them, you could still tell that at some point, they were human and were driven underground or to inbreeding or cannibalism. So in a way, to answer Emily's question, kind of like a hybrid, but more of like inbred creatures. And people will think, even though these were humans before, thinking, well, how could they be still alive? It's obvious. With the inbreeding and stuff, it's keeping their society going. And like I said, there's been quite a couple reports, and they said that, lone bikers, hikers, joggers, even drivers and hunters, have mysteriously disappeared with almost no trace of them ever being found, save for maybe a bike, backpack, or even a car. So
I did not hear that.
Yeah, Connecticut, I think, probably is the most famous stories. There's actually a road that runs through. It's called Velvet Street, but due to its eerie atmosphere, but to the locals, it's called Dracula Drive.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. But people have asked me, would I investigate them? I'm not sure, but if I would, at least with a group, because I don't think I'd be able to investigate that by myself at night.
No, that's fair.
The movie that ending, the movie with the ending that I absolutely hated was Mama.
Mama,
Like
yes.
it was an awesome movie up until the ending. And I'm like, yeah, because the ending, I can't watch it again.
Yeah,
Well, did you know?
certain movies have a good start, and then the ending just doesn't jive.
Well, for starters, did you know, Amanda, that they're making a sequel now to Mama?
Are they really?
They are, even though it's
Hopefully, it has a
been a
better
decade.
ending than the
I
first.
don't know where it's going to go because now it's been over a decade. Of course, I know Guillermo del Toro. He's, huge in a lot of movies, so I know it's probably pushing him back. But another movie I could think of that really had a really bad ending that I was really disappointed was, see, with all the type of horror movies, I'm also into like a lot of the shark horror films. Jaws, obviously, but the one that really disappointed me was 47 Meters Down. It was great from the start, and the movie for the most part was great, but the ending were like, that's it. That's how it's ended. What the hell just happened?
Monster Squad. Yeah, I think that she put Monster Squad.
Yeah.
That movie was another movie that I grew up with. I loved Monster Squad.
Emily.
And that movie had like a family section for our movie store, and they had some certain parts in there with Dracula holding the little girl up in the air, calling her a little bee, and then them kicking Wolfman in the nards, and yeah, like, they look cool. The creatures, like the practical effects and the makeup was awesome. Wolfman blowing up in many pieces and forming back together. Yeah, Monster Squad was awesome. That movie is so good.
Trying to think, there was one other movie I could think of that was really well. Okay, so I actually did have to ask this one because it's one of my most favorite horror films now, modern ones that is. What was your view, if you've seen it, on the movie adaptation of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
Oh, um, I was expecting more from it. I think I was more into the books
Yeah, because I'm a
personally.
huge fan of those books, and I love the movie, honestly.
It looked cool. I love the design of the movie itself, like the look of it. I read those books as a kid a lot. I still own the copies of the first originals. Even like Goosebumps, I own the first 60 original books. I met R.L. Stein. I got him to sign my first book. And yeah, it's one of those things I will keep cherish forever, having those kid movies or kid shows. And like, this is awesome.
Well, if you're expecting more, I mean, if you were for Scary Stories, the movie, they are making a sequel to that one too. So who knows? Maybe the sequel will bring a lot more to it.
I think so. Like, it's sometimes like, especially if it's the first one, I find they're trying to feel out the audience and like see what works, what doesn't work. And I feel like they'll listen to the fans quite a bit for that one.
I know they've been trying. I know it was 5 years ago that it came out, and they were going to try to make the sequel as quickly as possible, but unfortunately, just like anything else, because the very next year, because of COVID-19, they had, and also the writers' strike that was going on, they had to force the production, into a halt until that was all passed. But I was told, because some people have been asking about what's happened with the sequel, even though it's been 5 years, they did say that it is still in development. They did get the script done. It's just a matter of trying to get everything else together. So what they're probably going to do now, from what I heard, is because now it's been a few years, even though that was not their intention, they did say they're thinking about maybe setting it a few years after the events of the first one, because obviously the kids are older now. So they're thinking about setting it somewhere like probably in the early mid 70s and still trying to have that main kid try to get her friends back in some way. So so in other words, they got a little bit of a plot line, but that's all that they basically have given so far.
Yeah, it's a shame when stuff like that happens, when productions are ready to go and then they get halted, and then they go and then they get halted again. So sometimes movies continue and then some movies get scrapped completely. They're like, no, we're not going to even bother with it.
I think they're also they're kind of taking their time with it because they don't want to rush.
Yeah.
Obviously, because if you rush too fast, then it's not going to live up to the original one. I think they want to put it together very carefully. It's like perfect, organized. They have everything ready to go and say, okay, this is how we're going to make it, or something like that. So I think also they're just trying to be careful so they don't, because they probably want the sequel to be just as good, if not better than the first one.
Yeah, and I definitely could see the sequel be even better. That's
I know
my
definitely
views.
more monsters would be brought into it, definitely.
I think so, yes.
And you look at the storyline with Sarah Bellows, you kind of wonder more about the backstory of it. I could even see if they made a third one, I could even see that being a prequel where maybe we could finally get a background story on the Bellows family and see like when all these scary stories first began. Because you see in the movie there were previous stories that were written that we never saw those incidents happen. So it could even start off like how it all began.
Yep. I think there's a lot to work with, I think, with that series. And
I
which
could
is
definitely
cool to
see a
see.
trilogy out of it, just like the books.
Yes, exactly. I even like Goosebumps. I wish they'd bring Goosebumps back, but with different episodes. I watched the remake of the Goosebumps TV show, and it continues the whole show. But I miss when they did a show about Slappy the dummy, and that was it. And they move on to the haunted mask. That was it. They move on to the next episode, different episode. I miss that. I miss like the whole each episode's different.
Right.
And I hope they bring that back one day. And I even watched the Goosebumps movies because that's the generation I grew up with watching those. And I was like, I'm curious.
The movie about the Bell Witch ending really disappointed me.
Oh, was it said a movie about Bell Witch? Was that in American Nightmare, or was that a different movie focusing on the Bell Witch?
It was focusing. Well, it focused more of the Bell Witch of it at the time. Nothing like after, not at after, but the ending. Basically, it wasn't haunting or a Bell Witch at all. It was the basically the little girl was getting essayed by her dad, so that was a whole actual real thing.
Right. Okay, that makes more sense.
And
I
I'm just
haven't
like,
seen
really,
it
it was a good movie up until the ending. I'm like, this is what you decided to go with.
American Haunting.
See,
I
that's what I
forgot.
thought too. I thought it was an American Haunting too. That was
Yeah.
the
I
first
don't
movie
think
that
that's what
came
it's.
into my mind. And that was like
I
from
can't.
that was like the early 2000s, I think, like around 2005, I think, or 6 it came out.
Yeah, I think it was early 2000s for those.
Amanda, I got to run upstairs just real quick. I'll be back in just a minute. Ironically, I said I thought my package had arrived, but it didn't. But now it did. So I'll be back in just a second.
The Bell Witch Haunting. That's what it's called.
Okay, no, I don't
But,
think I've seen that one.
yeah, it's the ending that disappointed me.
And that's a shame
Don't.
sometimes when movies just end on a bad note because that's all you remember.
Yeah, and it's like it was good up until the ending, and unfortunately, once that ending is bad, that's what, like you said, that's what you remember, and you're like, oh.
It's what you go home with, right? Like even if you watch like TV series like Dexter, I was not a fan of the ending. I did not like the ending at all, and it kind of like tarnished the whole series just about for me. Where I'm like, I really don't want to watch it again.
Yeah, it's that ending. It's what are they trying to? I think they're thinking about bringing it back, and I hope they decided against that and not actually going to go through with that. Because yeah.
Oh yeah, they brought Dexter back again,
Oh, did
and it
they?
yeah, it was like a new series, and it lasted the one season, and the ending was bad again. I think so. I was like, oh, that's two bad endings now. So I don't know. You should probably leave that series alone.
Definitely. There is a doll here in Japan that I wish someone would do a horror movie on. The doll itself is not evil, but it has the possibilities of a really good horror movie. And it's they call it the Okiku doll. still on display in northern Japan. But basically, it was this brother gave the doll to a little girl and she was 2 years old. She made it like her best friend. Unfortunately, she tragically got sick and passed away. But they said after that they noticed that the doll, her hair, the doll's hair grows still,
Oh,
even to this day. The priests at the temple said they still have to cut her hair because originally when the little girl got the doll, the family said her hair was like shoulder length, and then one day they realized it was down to the middle of her back. And they always say like on
interesting.
her birthday or the day of her death, that's when the paranormal activity would pick up, like hear knockings on the walls, things moving, weird noises, footsteps of people who weren't there around those times. And they also said this doll can visit. People have said that they've seen this doll visit them in their dreams.
Huh.
So it could
Jeez.
be like, yeah. So I keep thinking, how come no one has made a scary movie on this? But what's also interesting about that doll is, so it's obviously its face is like porcelain, but for some odd reason lately, and it's an older doll, but for some odd reason, its mouth is starting to slowly open, and where like the gums would be, and obviously it's porcelain. They call them porcelain gums. Obviously, not really any gums there. They're starting to see what looks like baby teeth come through.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I'm just like, how come no one is making a horror movie on this?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's growing hair. It's now the mouth is starting to open after over 20 years of them having the doll. The family had the doll 20 years before that. For some odd reason, that mouth is just starting to open and teeth are starting to form. And I'm like, why is no one making a horror
That
movie
is
off of the doll? Hair grows, teeth are forming. It visits you in your dreams.
that is just crazy. Yeah, that would be a great movie to make.
Yeah, it's shocking that no one's done that.
I'm just
I'm
kind of
surprised Charles Band didn't do it yet.
yeah, I'm surprised too. I'm just blown away by that.
Yeah, and I keep trying to say, I'm like, this would be a good horror movie. I don't know why. Because like I said, the doll itself is not supposed to be evil, but I'm like, yeah, doesn't mean you can't make a horror movie out of a doll like that, though.
You know, there was
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna look
the
it up.
only thing the only thing that comes even close to something like that that I could think of, not and I'm not going to say Robert the doll, a different doll. Not as notorious. I don't really know much of the story itself, but it was actually at a castle in the UK, Chillingham Castle to be exact. And if you guys remember that show, Scariest Places on Earth, you guys
Yeah.
remember that? When they had a American family go out. They were actually the very first family that took part in the show. They there was a room in the castle where there was like an old an old porcelain doll that they had. And you could see it on camera too. One of the family members, he had, like a thermal camera, like to, obviously to measure the temperature. And the weirdest part about this doll was, even though it was relatively cold out that night, it was sweating. I mean, literally sweating. And it was, yet the thermals were reading that it was cold. It didn't make the least bit of sense, but you can clearly see on camera that the doll was sweating. I've never seen anything like that before. I think it freaked them out so bad. They didn't even want to touch it. They didn't even want to figure out, well, could it just be moisture or something on it? They were too scared to figure it out, but it literally was more like sweat than anything else.
Huh.
So imagine if the doll you're talking about, Amanda, imagine if it done the same thing. Like, holy cow, this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you look it up, you can read more about the Okiku doll, so she's very famous over here. But obviously, me being over here, I'm also starting to see the reports of the mouth opening, and they're just like, yeah, we're looking in. At first, we're like, it's weird, but then, more time goes on, we're looking in a mouth. All of a sudden, we see what looks like baby teeth coming through what is porcelain gums, and they're just like, I don't know how to explain this. They already couldn't figure out how to explain the hair growing. But now that it has teeth, they're like, they can't explain it.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, I'm gonna save that and look into it more.
Yeah, I actually just decided to look it up real quick because now I'm curious.
I'm surprised no one from America has done a movie for that yet, or Bloomhouse, or
There's YouTube videos on it actually. It's called the I hope I'm saying this correctly. The Okiku doll. I think that's what it is. Yeah. There's several YouTube videos. In fact, there was just one of these videos was just released about 4 weeks ago. The Okiku doll, Japan's most terrifying haunted doll.
I just seen
They
that
don't
too.
make a movie on this, and I'm like, okay, why are we calling it terrifying?
Well, and especially since it's from Japan, I'm sure they could make a real good horror film out there. And oh my god, I mean, I'm looking. I didn't even really see the full display. It's actually a really creepy looking doll.
Yeah, because I know it's a really older doll.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. Now, okay. Now that you said that, wow. Jeez, who would want to have that at their home?
Well, that's why it's now in the. That's why it's now in a temple where monks take care of it, though, and they take care of it due to her reputation of the paranormal stuff.
It's locked up in like a case, then.
It is locked up in a case, and obviously only like the monks can access it to like take care of it because they actually have a to-do list on things to take care of. And the monks who take care of her even say, "Yeah, she'll visit us in our dreams and kind of tell us what she'd like added to that list." So I'm like, yeah. So I don't think she's evil, but terrifying to think. Other people have said people who visit her said later that same night, she's visiting them in their sleep. But they never actually said what she did. They just said they're terrified because she's just visiting them in their dreams.
That writes a plot right there alone.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, it's basically the Freddy Krueger version of a doll.
Yeah.
Chucky meets Freddy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Well, it actually makes me now wonder because now I'm gonna have to do more research on it. It also makes me wonder of what the like the history of the doll because I'm sure it's got quite a history to it.
It does, yeah. So the family had it for 20 years. They kept it because it was their daughter's favorite doll before she tragically passed. And unfortunately, when she passed, she was actually holding on to that doll. And with it being her best friend, the family originally wanted to bury the doll with her, but they couldn't because Japanese law back then they wouldn't allow them to. So here in Japan, it's very normal for the households to have shrines to their deceased relatives. So they had the doll in the shrine to her, and that's when they kind of started noticing, especially like I said, her birthday and her anniversary, they'd really have more paranormal activity pick up in their house. And then one day they opened the door and looked at it and saw that the hair was much longer. So after her death, for some reason, her hair grew and just stuff like that. There was always stories in town about it. So when the family moved away 20 years later, they went to the local temple and they're like, well, we're afraid because Japan is more superstitious than they are religious.
Right.
They were afraid if we take this doll away from its original home or too far away from it, it's going to lose its magic. So the temple's like, yeah, we ever heard of this doll. We're excited. Give it to us. We'll take care of it. And they just said, yeah, they just kept taking care of it. And they even said that we have to trim her hair because it just keeps growing.
That's wild.
And now it's all of a sudden, after however long they've had it, they're like, for some reason, now it's forming, the mouth is opening, it's forming teeth.
Just got to say in the comments, Jill was asking, first off, good to see you, Jill, in the chat. She's asking to show the doll. I got a picture. You mind if I share this quickly, Amanda?
No, that's fine. Yeah, because I might feel people like, what are you talking about? This doll?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There she is.
Yep. Yeah, that is creepy as hell.
Yeah, see, the mouth is open. But it was not like that for over 40 years. The mouth was closed. Like if you see other pictures of it, the mouth is closed and it's porcelain. Yeah. Like, why is this mouth opening on its own?
No, I'm not really being able to zoom in that well, but you could actually see like the edges of what might be teeth in the mouth.
Yeah, you can see that.
That
That's what
is
they said. That's what the monk said when they get a closer look. Because once they started seeing it open, they kept looking inside to see what was inside. Now they're starting to see.
they kind of look sharp almost in a way. They're just kind of beastly looking.
I'm
See,
gonna
there
say
you
it
go.
looks
Another
jagged.
part of the plot there, Nick.
Yeah, it's like
Sharp teeth.
I was gonna say that they kind of remind me a little bit like that of a shark's. That is
She
just
visits
so
you
weird.
in her dreams. She visits you in your dreams, and she has really sharp teeth to bite you.
It's like a vampire doll, if you will. But that is nonetheless, that is creepy as hell. That really is.
Yeah, that's wild. Like the teeth thing is that is something.
Right. Says she looks so real, like living.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. A lot of people assume they call her Ukiku after the little girl that owned her. I don't actually know if it's her spirit in that doll though.
Yeah, it's
But
kind of hard to say. Oh, okay. So I just looked up um to also add more to the history. Okay, so this doll is well over definitely well over 100 years old because it says I'm just going to read just a little part of it. According to the story of Okiku, the doll was purchased by a 17-year-old boy named Aikichi Suzuki. I hope I'm
yeah,
saying this correct.
some of
Yeah,
the names over here, even words are hard to say.
it's hard for me. I'm no exception. It's hard for me sometimes to say their names. During a visit to Sapporo for a marine exhibition in 1918, the doll was a gift from his travels for his 2-year-old sister named Okiku. In some versions of the story, she's called Kiku. Again, I'm sorry. I'm just butchering these names. When she was initially purchased, the doll had a hairstyle called Okappa, similar to a bob cut, which is popular on Japanese dolls. Okiku loved her new doll, and it served as the little girl's companion until she died suddenly from a cold-like illness at the age of 3.
Yeah, they
Devastated,
said it was either malaria or yellow fever.
which is
Irene
not
said given the time, she thought it was malaria.
which is not surprising because unfortunately a lot of kids, got that, regardless of where you were from. Devastated by their loss, Okiku's family put her favorite doll in the household altar where they prayed in memory of Okiku. Before long, the family noticed that, like you said, Amanda, the hair on Okiku's doll had begun to grow as if the hair was on the head of a human. The
Yeah,
family concluded that the restless spirit of Okiku, who died so young, was now inside her beloved doll. The doll remained with Okiku's family until 1938 when they were moved to Iwa, Owamizawa, I hope I'm saying that right again, in Hokkaido, and gave the doll to the Menji Temple, where she remains enshrined to this day. She is now referred to as Okiko after her former owner. Some believe that the hair continues to grow from her head is the hair of the child Okiku.
Hmm.
no, they
Yeah,
did. Scientists did prove they did have it a sample looked at her hair, and they said it is human hair, but doesn't
it,
explain why it's still it's like a wig. Why is it still growing?
it's also interesting to think that this doll also, I mean, I'm not sure how far it would be from your area, in this case, Amanda, but it's also interesting to think that this was also a doll that survived World War II, like with the case of the atomic bombs, because a lot of vast items were lost to the bombs, and it's amazing that the doll is still in existence when everything else was pretty much lost
Yeah.
at that period. It survived all these catastrophes.
State of intact.
Yeah.
It's like like Poltergeist with all the stuff that happened on the set with the little girl and all that.
And that too is also kind of partially based off a true story too, if you didn't know.
Yeah.
It dealt with the popping ghosts, as they called it, but happened in New York back in the late 1950s. Even though it was a completely different story, it did serve as the inspiration for it. Joe makes a really good point here. Yeah, dolls are vessels, belief of it. It can be used to contain a spirit, hence the Chucky Child's Play series.
I wonder what would happen if they went with like the original storyline with Chucky not being a killer doll. It was like Andy, the one that was like killing people.
Yeah.
Like you would never had the whole Chucky series, I don't think.
I think in just some way, I mean, I know it was just a new take because, truth be told, I mean, it was one of the first horror films ever to combine both the slasher genre and the supernatural genre together.
Yeah. And it's cool because, like, even at the start, you're like, is he alive? Is Andy? They give like little hints that if it's Andy killing everybody.
Yeah. It has a good twist to it, definitely. And that too was shot here in Chicago, so that was another movie made from home. Actually, come to think of it, quick story is that guy Svengoolie I was telling you about. He actually had some friends of his who lived in that area at the time when Child's Play was filmed. And the opening scene, like when they're going through the toy shop, and then when it's like burned to the ground, those friends of Svengoolie's actually lived right across the street from the set. So they were actually able to see it from their bedroom windows when this was, because it was all being shot late at night. So they were able to see, it's like they got a free viewing of a scene from this upcoming movie, and the movie had not even been finished or released yet.
That's cool.
That's always such a rare moment for a lot of people to see something like that.
Oh, I would love I've been on a few movie sets, but like I'd love to be just like walking down Vancouver or something and just watching the whole process.
Jill here says Victorian times used them as death dolls too, right? A doll created to represent their loved one, passed on, especially children, I believe.
That's learning a lot today.
I was going to say, I actually thought that was, I thought that was something that was big in Japan, but like you said, Amanda, they didn't usually allow, prized possessions to be buried with certain individuals, during the early days.
With dolls here, it's also a superstition in Japan, and this could be easily added to if they ever made a movie about that. A scary movie based off of the doll. Is in Japan, it's their superstition that you can't give a doll to a child if the doll is the doll has to be smaller than the child that you give it to, because if it's the same size or bigger, something's going to happen to that child, and it's going to take over the child's soul.
Yeah, I can see where they're going with that. I was just thinking of another, well, it's not in Japan, but I was just thinking, of course, you look at in this case with traditions with dolls. Another one I could think of, and this is, I'm sure we've heard of this one, is when it comes to like Amish communities and the dolls they have with those. And the creepiest part about those dolls is they never have faces to them. They're just blank faces.
Blank.
Yeah, and I often wondered for the longest time, thinking, why do they not have faces on their dolls? I mean, don't they find that, kind of creepy in a way? Like,
Well, they say it's to the Amish say the reason why their dolls don't have faces, it's because it promotes vanity.
Not only that, I just looked it up too. It says the dolls are left faceless because all are alike in the eyes of God, and that the lack of facial features agrees with the Bible's commandment against graven images. Most Amish doll makers are also anonymous, so it's very rare to reveal what who the actual maker of the doll is, but it it's basic. So yeah, it's like in their culture, it represents that, I guess, facial features are like considered like ways that God is watching you, basically. And to remove those facial features, you don't have to worry then that God is keeping an eye on whatever you're doing, regardless whether it's right or wrong. So that's why a lot of times, putting the eyes on the doll will make it too human-like versus it's just being considered toy. So like that's why they basically remove them. So regardless whether they're going, against the rules, the rules of the church or their community or the rules of God, as they say, at the very least, their kids wouldn't have to worry about, being caught with whatever they're doing. So that's why they leave the dolls faceless. And they're very superstitious. That's correct.
Interesting.
I know
I
here
didn't
in
know
Japan,
that.
they also believe with the because most dolls here are like handmade, but they also believe that doll makers are unable to have children of their own because part of them goes into each doll that they make, making it so they can no longer have children.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if I don't know how that superstition became about. I just remember hearing about that where they believe that if you're a doll maker, each part, and I see where they get it, each part of them goes into each doll that they make, but unfortunately, it makes it so they are unable to have children of their own.
Right. Okay. I also found out they also make similar dolls like that, like faceless ones. Not surprisingly, they also make them similar for the similar group, the Mennonites, too. They make similar dolls like that too. I don't know exactly what it represents in their community, because even though there's a lot of similarities between the Amish and the Mennonites, I'm sure it probably has a different meaning for Mennonite dolls. Yeah,
I'm not sure the difference in the Amish and well, yeah, I know they are very similar when it comes to superstition and culture.
right. And that's the other thing too when it comes to like all these different dolls too. Again, not just in this case. It's fascinating how they're always looked at in different cultures, like what Jill said. Victorian times they were used as death dolls too. Others were used for vessels. It's the list goes on. I mean, who knows in what these type of items represented in different in other countries in the case. Of course, obviously over here, yes, they're just nothing more than viewed as toys, but it's also funny to think too again that they've also kind of been used as like a representation of horror media too, like we said about Child's Play, Puppet Master, dolls, that too goes on. So it's always quite fascinating to think about.
There is also it is a over here in Japan. It is a supposedly it's a ritual. I heard about it, but they go to like a temple or shrine between 2 a.m. to 2:30, and they do a ritual. And part of the ritual includes nailing a faceless doll to like a sacred tree there and perform. I don't know how the rest of the ceremony goes, but they do it to curse someone. Like if you
Hmm.
wronged me, I'm gonna go. They could go to the shrine late at night. You're also supposed to not be seen as part of the ritual.
Oh,
They say
really? Okay.
if someone sees you, unfortunately, they cannot live, or the curse is going to come back and be on you if you don't finish it, or if someone sees it and you let them live. The curse is going to be no longer on a person you're trying to curse, but it's now on you.
Right.
Huh.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, that's something I never knew about actually.
Yeah, you have to wear white clothing, not be seen, and do it between 2 and 2:30 a.m. and just nail a faceless doll to a tree. That's all I know. I don't know how else you do it.
Right. Yeah, what Jill said on a side note, we should normalize collecting tons of dolls, haunted or not be seen as an odd, etc. Love dolls regardless.
Yes and no, as long as it depends on the haunted doll, if you can handle it.
Yeah, very much so.
Not everyone can handle all haunted dolls, so if you can't.
So it'll be a faceless ghost. Wasn't
That's
there, I
awesome.
was just thinking of another movie actually that dealt with something so, and this is one I feel like doesn't really get a lot of attention is that movie Magic from the late 70s. Did you guys ever see that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, with Anthony Hopkins in it.
that's one that I don't think much people talk about.
That is one I just recently discovered a few years ago, and I still haven't seen that one. But from what I did see the the commercial for it on YouTube, and according to what I heard was when they made that commercial for Magic, it freaked so many people out that they actually had to pull it from several channels because it would be broadcasting at a time like when kids were watching TV, because it was really no different than like any other television ad that was being broadcasted on TV. So they thought, well, shouldn't be. How bad could this be? And then all of a sudden they started getting all these phone calls like that from these angry parents saying, "Look what you got! Thanks to your commercial, a kid's gonna have nightmares now for it."
It's like Ghoulies. I remember Charles Band talked about Ghoulies.
Yep.
He don't show a commercial on TV, and the commercial basically was like a ghoulie popping out of the toilet. And I guess it scared so many kids to go to the toilet for potty training and all that. They'd send him letters of death threats and
Oh my
threatening
God.
to like kill Charles Band and saying some awful things about
Holy
Charles Band because they
cow.
can't take their kid to the washroom anymore because they're scared of ghoulies popping out of the toilet. And yeah, if you watch the trailer or teaser trailer of Ghoulies, it's just basically a ghoulie popping out of the toilet, and it's smart marketing because they got quite a bit of money from that first one.
I never would expect that parents would actually go to the extreme of like death threats. Like, holy cow.
Yeah, some
Oh,
people get
I will
pretty serious.
never go against Nick. If there is horror movie trivia night, I'm either on Nick's team or I'm not participating. Like, oh, next team, yeah, I'm good.
I mean, I do what I can when it comes to these movies.
It's fun. Yeah, it's cool to have that knowledge about the old horror movies or old movies.
Yeah, and there's like, not to mention there's so many others out there that, you know, we just, a lot of people don't really know about. And it's those type of movies I wish can get a lot more attention. Even some of the like classic slasher movies. Let's see here. I think we'd all lose trivia.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Speaking of which, I mean, maybe at some point we should do this. I do actually have a board game that's a horror movie trivia game, like literally.
No one is going to play against. You'd have to host it because no one's going to play against you.
Oh yeah.
Everyone knows who's going to lose. Like, Nick is playing, everyone loses.
Yeah, it probably would not be long for me to win that very quick. I actually did do it on a show like about maybe 2 years ago or something like that, and I don't really remember what the results were for that, but I did play it one night on a show.
That's cool.
So would love to try though and end up crying after losing. Yeah, it's always just good knowing about the certain type of trivia facts, and just I always think I find that's what I also think what makes some of these movies, you know, just as fascinating when you find out about behind the scenes and the trivia facts.
Oh, it's like Friday 13th, even there's parts where they wouldn't tell the actors that Jason's gonna bust down the door, bust through the window, and grab the actor. And
Didn't they also do that with Halloween?
oh, 100%.
They
I
said
find
it
a
was
lot of
like-
those older films, they kind of keep stuff a little bit hidden from the actors just to get more reaction, I think.
I remember hearing about the Halloween too, where they randomly had to like break in and they just went it. The actors were expecting it to keep it more authentic. Like,
Yes.
yeah, when I see him screaming in fear, they actually were, because they expect him to. They thought something else was going to happen. All of a sudden, he's breaking down the door. There he is.
Is I know one particular was Corey Feldman, sorry. Corey Feldman with Friday 13th Part 4.
Yep.
Final chapter. He's near the window and he's waiting for Jason to bust through the window, and he delayed it by a little bit. And then he busts through the window and grabbed Corey there, and he definitely scared him.
There was actually one time that I was going to try to make a film my own, and I was going to try to really make it as realistic as possible. It was in fact, I wanted to go a different direction, because it was a movie that I actually wanted to have kids involved with. I mean, it wouldn't be like a gruesome movie involving kids, but I would have them as the main character. But I also thought, what better way to really, because I wanted to I would not only want it to be fun, but I would actually want it to be frightening. And I have these really cool like visions in my head where, like, I can't remember the full story. I think I was going to try to make like a zombie film. It was, but it wasn't going to be like your typical zombie apocalypse story or anything like that. It was just going to deal with like just a single individual coming back from the dead. And I think it was involving like a magician that I was gonna, so that's where the idea of kids was gonna be, involved in this project. But I also based it off of a cartoon that I remember watching. So it was also based on something from childhood. I just can't remember what it was. And there's a scene or something like that where they're watching a zombie movie, ironically enough. I thought, well, what better, if I wanted to make this like a live action movie, what better way than to have them sit, watch a zombie? And of course, the movie I would obviously choose for them, even though it's not really a kid's movie to begin with, but it's still a classic horror movie, is undoubtedly Night of the Living Dead.
And it's free to use in movies too. If you watch a lot of horror movies, you see Night of the Living Dead pop up on everywhere because there's no rights to it, basically.
That's correct. You can even have it broadcasted if you want to, because it's public domain.
I put in mine even just because, like, why not?
Exactly. So I thought, what better way than to make it even more realistic? Have them watch a scene of Night of the Living Dead and filming their reactions if they've never, because obviously they would have never seen it before. That's definitely also a good way to get like real horror reactions. And then later on in this film, then having almost like kind of not necessary, but almost coming across the real deal. Someone returned from the dead. And that just makes it even more realistic then. It would have, I wanted to try to film that over a decade ago, but unfortunately the amount of work and budget, which I just didn't have, unfortunately, it just never materialized. But that's not to say that I could eventually make it sometime in the future, because I have been taking a break from filmmaking because it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work to put in. So
tons. There's a lot of work put in movies, even if it's like small budget, big budget. There's tons. Even my movies, they're $200. It's still a lot of work.
Well, and even more funnier is that even still now, I mean, I have the project shelved. We never even got yet. So it was like that situation that we had a good storyline. We just didn't have a script ready.
Yep. And that happens. Like, I actually had some ideas way back in like 2012, 2013, where I'm starting to use them now just because it didn't fit in that movie, or I kind of scrapped the idea, but it's still in my back of my head. I was like, that's a cool idea. I just have to wait for the perfect moment for it. And just recently I wrote the new script and I used an idea from 2013 in this new one because it just fit the storyline.
Well, and that's actually kind of, so, I mean, even like we just brought up with Night of the Living Dead, like even George Romero had explained, before he passed away on several interviews, that when he made Night of the Living Dead back in 1968, he honestly didn't know what to expect of that movie.
Yeah.
He didn't think it was going to be as huge as it is now. And it was just, again, kind of in a similar case, just nothing more than just a typical low budget movie, almost a student movie in a way. Because there's no, I mean, they weren't at the time, but these were not like big, well-known actors or anything like. Most of them were local, people who lived in the area, friends of George Romero, and that was all. So it was just like your typical student film. But again, he never expected it was going to be as big as it has been for now over 55 years later.
Oh, it's one of the most popular horror films, I'd say, just because of how much times it's been remastered and put out there. It inspires so many zombie films out there. George Romero was a huge influence for zombies, 100%. I got a chance to meet him.
Me too.
The sad thing was his lineup was like no one in it. And it made me kind of, I was like, this sucks, because like this dude was a huge legend of like Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, like all these zombie films.
Of the Dead.
You even got like Monkey Shines that he did, and no one is like really in the lineup. And I felt kind of bad because like this guy might not be remembered in this, what he did for the horror community.
I'm really surprised by that, because I remember the time when I met him at a Fangoria's weekend in Chicago when I was 16 years old, and he had a huge line at that time. This was good. Yeah, at that time this was for the 40th anniversary. It was a year afterwards though, 2009. In fact, my other show was Don, who I've known for several years. He was there too, and I remember we had to wait in line for over an hour to see him because the line had wrapped around the convention just for him to appear. So he had a bigger turnout. But my dad, who was with us, this was kind of the cool thing. He's like, well, the line's really long right now. Why don't we go check out some of the other horror celebrities? And then right before they're about to, end things, we'll run up to the table and we'll get our picture then. So we spent the rest of the festival, meeting up with the other horror celebrities, including, you brought him up earlier, Bill Moseley. He was there. So
Nice.
yeah, we got to meet him too. And then just as we predicted, the line was about to end, but we were able to get permission to say, is there any chance, because these boys really want to see him? And they got to allow us to. We got a free picture with him. We got to talk to him for a few minutes. I'm sure it must have been exciting for him seeing that, basically two high schoolers coming up and saying that we love his movies. The fact that it was still, earning a legacy, that it was continuing even for the younger generation, that had to be something that must have been very exciting for him to see, because I know there were some young people there, maybe like in their 20s, but I didn't really see any other kids. So we were probably the youngest fans that he had, that he had in his line for it. So that must have been something real, because it goes to show that even after, when he was going to be dead and gone, people were still going to watch his movies, even after, after all these years.
And that's exciting. I like that. We actually do double feature horror nights at a theater close to us called SWT Lyceum Theater. I'm part of a board member with them, and we show a classic horror film and then we show a new horror film. That way, the young generation brings out their parents to show them the new horror film, but then our generation shows their kids what they grew up with. So it's kind of like a crossover thing. Like, hey, we grew up watching Nightmare on Elm Street. We grew up watching Friday the 13th, The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. And then they got to show their parents this new horror film that just got released. And it's kind of a cool thing, because a lot of people that came out to these double features have never seen like Friday the 13th or Jaws or Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So it's like their first time watching it. And it's cool to see their reaction to watching these classic horror films first time. And people like grew to loving it. I'm like, that's sweet. Now that's a whole new fan base, possibly.
I mean, I actually just saw that a couple of weeks ago in early October. There was a special screening at a nearby theater just about 10 minutes away from me of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the 50th anniversary of it. And when we walked in, and again, I was with Don for this, when we walked into the theater, we were expecting it was going to be mostly just like the people who grew up with it. We thought we were going to be, once again, the youngest people there. I was amazed to find out that although there was only like maybe 7 or 8 people in the theater. It wasn't that big of a turnout, but the majority of those that were there were mostly high schoolers. I couldn't believe that I saw this. I'm thinking, this is awesome. Like, here's a classic movie that's turning 50 years old, and there's some high schoolers here checking out this movie. And they have their parents with it. And some of their parents were, pretty young too. This was probably a movie that was made even before their parents were even born. Yeah. And the fact that it was continuing on with generations, I mean, it was awesome to see that its legacy is never going to end.
I love that. And I hope it never ends, because some of those old movies are outstanding. Like, some of them are just pure art.
I think, as a way, because again, as filmmakers, between, us in this case, is that, that's the other thing, is that it's sad to know that, at some point, we're not going to be able to live forever. So the sad part is we may have lost a lot of these filmmakers, and, that's going to be the same for us too, later in our lives. But hopefully these films will continue to be watched, for many decades to come.
And I think they will, and that's why I like doing these double features, to hopefully keep on bringing the new generation to see these movies, and then maybe they'll love it, and then maybe they'll show their kids, kind of, and just keep on going.
Definitely.
One movie that was really popular when it came out, and it's due to the ending, was Sixth Sense.
Oh yes, The Sixth Sense.
Because everyone's just like, I didn't expect that ending.
Yeah, that ending shocked a lot of people back then.
It's still mentioned today in a lot of media, just because the people are just like, the ending. Like, I don't know if it's one of the first movies that had like a twist ending that people are like, oh my god, I never would have seen that coming. But now that, but when you look back at every scene, it makes more sense.
Yeah, very much so. That was kind of the same thing for me too when I first watched it. That really took me by surprise. It really did.
I like the unexpected endings. Even if you want to go back to like Friday 13th, the original is a nice little calm scene of like the camera zooming up to the canoe,
Yep.
and you're like, oh, this is it. Then no, boom, Jason comes out from behind the canoe, pulls her in, and it's wild. It's crazy that these old horror movies are still shocking people too. Like Jaws, I watched Jaws in the theater, and people still jumped and screamed during the scuba diver's body appearing in the water.
Yeah, I've
like,
seen that
that's
for myself.
awesome.
You know, that I saw it in the theater too for one of the anniversary showings, and there were indeed people who jumped during that scuba diving scene. But there was actually one scene from that movie that I'll never forget. That, and it's obviously probably the most notorious scene is when Quint talks about the sinking of the Indianapolis, and I'll never forget just the audience, like when Quint was saying that, was making that entire speech. Because before, like, they were drunk, they're laughing. You could hear people in the audience laughing too because it's funny. But when he gets that famous part, the entire theater literally, just like probably was back in 1975, the theater was dead silent at that point. I mean, you could literally hear a pin drop in that theater. So the reactions is phenomenal.
I love the reactions.
Yeah, that was so. Yeah, the reactions you get now, you just don't get that very much in a lot of theaters nowadays, sadly.
So much stuff has been done that even like horror fanatics, they're just like, I already seen this, saw it coming.
Yep. And when you also brought up about like Friday the 13th, that first time watch, that definitely scared the hell out of me the first time because, well, except I think it affected me to a different degree because like when I watched it, see, I was told before, I thought it was Jason that was in all the movies. And I thought, that's what I thought too for the first one. And when I found out that it was his mom in the first one, it was good. But I think at that time, because again, I was only like 12 or 13, I think I was actually disappointed.
Yeah.
It wasn't Jason. And when it plays that sequence and it has that nice music playing in the background, for me, I guess it actually kind of sounded sad to me. It sounded kind of upsetting knowing that. But when he jumps out of the water, like unexpectedly, not only did it scare, I'm thinking, you know what? I actually feel better now.
Yeah.
I was satisfied then. So I was like, you know what? He still made an appearance in some way, but that was good enough for me.
See, I remember my dad would be like, got me introduced to Jason Voorhees, and I remember watching the first one. I was kind of disappointed because I wanted the hockey mask killer dude, right? So I still respect the original.
Excuse me.
It's definitely not my favorite of the Friday 13th franchise, I'd say, but
it still lives up to, it still has a legacy in its own right.
Oh, 100%. You can't deny the legacy of Friday 13th original.
And I've met Ari Lemon, the guy who plays the young Jason, and really great guy to chat with. It was funny at the time when we met him too. We saw him at a Paracon, and my friend and I that I was with, we just went to go grab something to eat at one point. This was out in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and when we while we were waiting to get our food, suddenly this guy comes in. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I said it quietly. He's like, whoa, what's the matter? That's the first Jason from Friday the 13th. He's like walking into the restaurant along with somebody else I've never seen before. It's just funny. Sometimes you run into these big names when you very least expect it, who worked in some of these movies, like when they're on their break time from these conventions.
Yeah, I was at a restaurant. Me and my friend went to a restaurant in Calgary, just a random restaurant he picked. And next minute, Kane Hodder walked in.
Yeah.
Kane. And I was like, oh my God, it's Kane. I was like trying not to fanboy out, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's Kane." I'm like, I won't talk to him. He's just there to eat his food, so I'll talk to him tomorrow at the convention. But I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." And then a very cool thing was even at the convention, there's like a bar in like the hotel area. So you got like Kane Hodder, CJ Graham, I think, and one of the leather faces all sitting with each other having drinks. I'm like, this is so cool. I'm like trying not to like fanboy out. I was just watching them. I'm like, this is so cool having them in the bar with us having drinks.
That's awesome. When you met, okay, so if you've met Kane Hodder, this leads me to a question because I've met him too, and I know he does this a lot. Did he put his hands around your throat?
He's not allowed to anymore.
Oh, he did that with me over a decade ago, and me and Don a decade ago. And oh my God, his strength that he has in his hands is just, oh my God, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a vice that he has.
He yeah, that's one of the rules. And then when he came to the convention a couple of years back in Calgary, that he was not allowed to do that because I think he accidentally had somebody pass out.
Jeez, why am I not surprised?
So I was disappointed kind of. I was like, damn, but I get it. But because who doesn't want to get like choked out by Jason Voorhees?
Yeah, he did that with us, but that was like back in 2012 when he did. So that was probably back when he was allowed to do that. But of course, I've heard not anymore, sadly. Because of health reasons too.
Michael Berryman from Hills of Eyes. I met him. I got a photo with him. So he's like, he's gonna do like the chokehold thing. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna count down 3, 2, 1. I'll choke you for the photo. I'm like, okay, cool. So he did 3 and then he choked me. He like instantly choked me, didn't even get down to 1. I'm like, so my face was reaction was for sure because like this guy's big and he did not count down to 1. He got me right away. I was like, that's awesome.
I didn't realize Michael Berryman does that too. I honestly didn't know that.
Yeah, I have a photo of it. It's great. It's priceless, especially if you know the story behind why my face is like that.
I didn't even know that he was even that big.
Yeah, he's a big dude. He's a big guy too. Even Tyler Mane.
The movie that Others has a similar ending, like The Sixth Sense.
Yeah, The Others. Yep. That one also, I think, was quite unexpected too. Like when you really look at it, especially when you find out that everybody in that movie, for the most part, was dead.
Yeah. And who they thought they were talking to, ghosts, were actually the living ones.
Yep. Yeah, that was another unexpected one I can remember, and I like too that it took place again, kind of during the World War II era.
Stir of Echoes is good too with that twist there with Kevin Bacon.
Surprisingly, I have not seen Stir of Echoes. I've been trying to for years. I just haven't had the opportunity to do it. But I heard that one was really well made too with Kevin, like you said, with Kevin Bacon.
He was phenomenal. That's one of his like better acting roles, I'd say, just because he gets really into it.
Well, it's funny to think because I was just thinking since you brought him up, of course, obviously he was in the original Friday the 13th, but I also thought of him too when he was in Tremors. It's that one I have a lot of fun with whenever we watch Tremors.
Tremors is such a classic one too. That's like one of my favorites. My brother's favorite horror film, I'd say.
I forget about that until you mentioned it.
Tremors is so good. It's a movie where you can introduce to a younger generation just to get them used to like the horror films kind of too.
Yeah, there's definitely something unique about Tremors. Definitely.
Oh, it's the monsters too, like just like those graboids and all that. I was like, that's so cool design.
Well, you guys might find this hard to believe, but even the graboids, again, are based off of a notorious cryptid. I mean, maybe not as big or as famous, but it was not from Japan, but from one of the other Asian countries, something known as the Mongolian deathworm. Yeah, that's said to live out in the Gobi Desert, although its methods of killing are different than what you see in Tremors. In the Mongolian deathworm case, it spits out a sick yellow saliva that almost acts like acid. Or it could also kill by means of electrical discharge, which powerful enough to kill a camel. And people said that there have been reports, but there's never been any actual documented sightings of this creature. But the people of Mongolia believe it definitely does exist. They say it's mostly hibernates for most of the year, only comes out between the months of June and July. And supposedly people say they could actually see this giant worm, parts of it sticking out of the sand when it's raining. And it's about the same, and they say it's supposed to be about the same size, well, maybe a little bit smaller than the graboids. The other difference too is it's said to be about 5 feet long, but it's still described as supernaturally large.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know there was that based off true events either.
Not necessarily true events.
True events, but like true.
I was going to say based off of a mythical creature.
Yeah, that's cool.
Robert White says, if the worms are that big, imagine the fish.
I didn't know he was watching. He must be watching for one of the other from one of the other destinations. Anything with Japanese culture tied to the film / stories always tops for me. They have the creepiest ghost stories. You can't sleep, and that's what we were talking about. What was that? I'm sorry, Amanda.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned in the beginning. It's something about Japanese horror movies. They're just they don't mess around. They're just no matter the budget, they're going to deliver.
Oh yeah, because without a shadow of a doubt.
They may not be fans of the paranormal, believe in paranormal here, but when it comes to scary storytelling, it's like an art form to them.
See, and I just think that's just something I wish that we could do more often, like over here in the U.S. Because, I mean, even though we've made some great horror films here in the U.S., for many years and decades, I still sometimes say that, we still have nothing over what Japan has when they make their particular movies, because they're just so well done. They're just so well made. They really are. And stories too. Yeah, best storytellers for sure.
The fun fact, it's not a scary story, but they do believe that Godzilla once existed over here.
I wouldn't be surprised by that either. And, even if you, honestly, that's also another movie worth bringing up. And if you even look at the original one as Gojira back in 1954, that had a very dark and serious tone. And it was, I'm sure it must have been quite scary for a lot of people of Japan to see, not only just seeing this, giant monster going through, but the fact that it also was based off of, again, from the effects from the atomic bombs from World War II and the horrors they faced themselves. They really made it look like it was like a documentary, like this really happened. And when you have those type of recent events and you have that turned into a movie like that, that's probably as real as you can ever get to really showing true horror on camera.
I like the new Godzilla there, the Godzilla -1. I thought that was phenomenal.
So here's a question for you. When you said, did you see, because they had two different versions of it, because I mean, not much of a huge difference. For some theaters, they had it released under, in black and white. Did you see it in color or in black and white?
I saw in color.
I saw it under the black and white version, and it looked great. I mean, it really, in a way, looks just like it could have been made in the 50s with a black and white to it. And it just, again, had a much more surreal look. And I'm glad that it finally, that it won an Academy Award in that case, which that was the first Godzilla movie in history to win an award like that.
And that's true. I told my friends that too. I remember I was like, hey, Godzilla won an Oscar. And they're like, what? I'm like, no, you check out Godzilla. This movie is actually really good. There's a good storyline. It's visually appealing. And it's just a phenomenal film. They think when they see Godzilla, they hear about Godzilla, they think the whole cheesy rubber dinosaur fighting other dinosaurs and monsters and the whole cheesy factor. But no, this movie is serious, and you should probably check it out.
It's like the first serious one within several years, and that's what I loved so much. And I remember when they announced it on the Academy, I literally jumped up. I was like, yes. And after that, I don't usually watch the Oscars very much. So that was just a moment. It was like, after I'm like, all right, I'm done.
That's all I watched too. I didn't care about anything else. I was like, I just wanted to see Godzilla win the award, and it did. I was like, that's awesome. And it had like a very small team behind it too.
Yeah, real absolutely. It really was. They definitely did a great job with that one. And I'm kind of curious because I know that they said that they were making I think they said they were already gonna make another one, but we'll definitely see. Well, actually, no, I don't think it doesn't say that anything. I was looking on Wikipedia before, and they did say there was going to be another one made, but now it's not saying so. I don't know if they changed their minds or if they pushed it back. I'm not sure, but now it doesn't sound like a sequel is going to be made. Maybe it's possible they just wanted to make this a standalone,
One and done.
like a one and done, like its own reboot. If they ever make any more, it probably wouldn't have any connection to this one.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with just this one because at least they showcased that Godzilla could be scary again.
Yeah, very much so. And that's what I think is. I think that's what real again. I think that's what satisfies me is even if no other movies were made from this one, that's fine with me because it was definitely a good way to end it.
And finally give Godzilla his credible.
Yeah, basically putting him back to like what he originally was compared to the one from 1954.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. I grew up watching Godzilla and King Kong and all that because my grandparents, that was their horror films basically. They'd watch Godzilla, King Kong, and then they'd watch like Universal Monsters with Dracula, Mommy, Creature from Black Lagoon. And I watched those too because, yeah, I wanted to learn and watch all these horror films.
That's kind of the same way I started off too. I started watching a lot of the giant monster movies, so that makes two of us as well.
I kept these actually. I got the film prints of like Dracula. My dad had them. It's his when he was a kid, and I got the 9mm films of like Dracula and Frankenstein. I still have them. Never touched them, never watched them because like, man, they'll probably just like burn up or shrivel up, and like I don't want to do that. And yeah, like it was from my dad when he was a kid, so like, it's a cool little thing to hold on to.
That's awesome. That really is.
This movie recently came out, but I think I heard they're already planning a part 2. It's Willy's Wonderland.
Willy's Wonderland. That name does ring a bell, but I just can't think of anything else of it for some reason.
I know.
Oh, it's Nick Cage.
Yes, Nick Cage. Yes.
Oh God, Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. Well, Nick Cage. So the budget for this movie was only like $5 million, but none of it went to Nick Cage. He did this role. He did that role for free, and he said it's because he wanted to challenge his acting ability, and that was his whole thing. Was I won't take any money to do this part because usually he gets paid a lot to do a part, but he's like, I'm not going to take a cent as long as you let me do the character the way I want to. And how I want to do the character is I want to see if I can make a movie where I can act but not say a word.
Yeah,
He literally did not say a word that whole entire movie.
yeah, it blew my mind because like when you see Nicolas Cage, you expect him to have lines in that, but he never had one single line, and it made me laugh. I think the most.
That is so funny that he didn't have any lines because I always
He
enjoy.
wanted to do that. He wanted the character to be that way though. He's like, I want to see if I want to challenge myself. I want to see if I can go a whole entire movie acting, do a good job delivering the character without saying a word.
Oh, I liked it. I thought it was a fun little film, and I enjoyed that he beat up these animatronic Chuck E. Cheese type characters.
Yeah, they obviously and I know it showed in the beginning that he was probably in the army. He had to he had to see combat or something because the way he was trained to hand-to-hand combat fighting.
I love that he took breaks through the movie because he's a
Yes, that's also what I
janitor.
tell people is they also show that he was kind of a veteran because the way he downed energy drinks all the time. That's actually what the military does is they drink energy drinks like it's nothing. they're so used to that, and he was so loyal to his breaks, Nick. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. He was so loyal to his breaks, or because the owner's like, "Oh yeah, take keep taking constant breaks. You don't overwork yourself." So he had a timer for when his break started and when they ended, and he was so loyal to it that there's one point where he was about to start a fight with the girl with the girl there, but his alarm went off for his break, where he just handed a knife to the girl and walked off, took his break, and came back and finished it.
And that made me laugh because like he just left that girl to fight the animatronic.
That is so funny.
He's like, "This is not my problem right now."
Went back and played games.
It's things like that when it comes to anything involving Nicolas Cage. It's like he's just that kind of guy you could just never take seriously, and that's what I love about him with what he does. And in fact, you guys, again, I know I keep bringing him up a lot. If you hear my friend Don, he can kind of do like a Nicolas Cage impression. It's actually pretty good.
Do you guys see Long Legs?
I was just about to actually ask that. That was I was going to say, what was your view on Long Legs? Because I saw that. Yeah, definitely.
I was going there with like low expectations, and I came out liking it. I loved how Nicolas Cage went so out there, and he got inspired by seeing his mom wear like makeup or something, he said. So that's why he had that white face.
Yep, he like albinism, I think he's supposed
to. Yeah, and he was very bizarre. I was like, holy moly.
That took me by surprise. Because like I said, normally I don't take him seriously. He usually makes me laugh, but this time is like, whoa, like holy cow. Like this is not, I was even saying, this is not the Nicolas Cage that I know.
This is like Face Off meets Buffalo Bill, basically.
That's the other thing. A lot of people say that Long Legs is kind of compared similar to that of Silence of the Lambs, especially Buffalo Bill.
7 even a little bit.
I've honestly kind of even almost seen it as like a way of thinking to myself that, to me, it's like Long Legs was, to me, if Silence of the Lambs was made today, instead of if it was made back in the early 90s. That's how I kind of describe that movie a lot. And I like how they have that they feature that old, like nostalgic feel. Like, yes, it takes place mostly in the 90s, but I also like how they use like those old-fashioned cameras from the 70s.
Oh, exactly. Even then, watching her evolve her character from being this shy detective and getting more out there and more confidence. I'm like, man, this is well done for development.
Yeah, there was something, just a different feeling when I first saw it. There was just something different about Long Legs, but it was great at the same time.
I did not expect it to be good. I was going there expecting to be just like, what is this?
Yeah, again, I was thinking Nicolas Cage is just going to make us laugh in this case, but no, he didn't do it this time. No. There was not one time I did not laugh at all.
And that's cool. Long Legs, I don't think it was like a very big production film as well, and it did really well in box office.
Robert White just said in the comments, it's like, Cage, no bees.
Nick Cage, yeah, I liked him in Kick-Ass as well. Like, I know it's not a horror film, but I enjoyed his role in Kick-Ass.
When Robert brought up bees, I was just thinking not the bees. That's like the only good part of that remake of The Wicker Man. It's like after that, it's like, all right, that's it. Don't need to watch anymore.
Sold.
Yeah, that's always a classic moment.
I just watched Wicker Man a few years back because I just kind of just avoided the remake, and it was something.
Yeah, the original, I heard that was a lot way better. Of course, I haven't seen that one yet, but from what I heard, it's again another good one from the early 70s.
Yeah, is well done for being in that generation, I think.
I honestly think, I know they don't feature bees in that part, but I'm even telling myself that bee sequence itself could have been its own movie.
it's yeah, no, it's cool that he took on a part for Willy's Wonderland,
Mhm.
and then they did like Five Nights at Freddy's a few
Yeah.
years after that one, I think. And there's another one too, Banana Splits. It was done before
Yep.
Willy's Wonderland, I think. So it was like 3 animatronic Chuck E. Cheese horror films back to back, just about.
Well, Banana Splits was based off an original
TV
show
show. Yeah.
back in the 60s. And
Yeah.
although difference was it was guys in costumes, not animatronics, but I've seen that. And I was, well, I know people who grew up with it were not happy with it, that it was turned into this gruesome horror movie. But for me, I actually enjoyed it. It was really good.
It's a lot of like these childhood shows, like we'll look at Winnie the Pooh or Bambi or
God.
Peter Pan. They're all turning them into horror films
Yeah,
now,
I
and it's
know.
kind of making me laugh because like, let's see what happens. Even that new Peter Pan movie, it looks dark. Like they have like that black
I'm
phone
glad they're
vibes to
doing a
it.
dark Peter Pan though, just because of the fact is I mean, especially when you grow up, you realize that Peter Pan is a real life villain.
That's
In a
what they're
way,
doing
yes.
too, and like that's cool. I
And
like
it's
that.
funny because they're like, if you actually break down Peter Pan, Captain Hook is actually the good guy, and Peter Pan was always the bad guy.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was like your juvenile delinquent.
So I do enjoy those takes.
Well, and this also goes back to another movie I talked about earlier. That movie Sinister. That the background about that character Bagul was when that character was in early development, and this goes back to another movie that we were talking about earlier. Sinister was intentionally supposed to be literally a true horror film version of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. They wanted to make literally a true horror version of Willy Wonka, but they know, of course, that wasn't going to work. But they had to come up with a new character. But they wanted to still make it a character that would be basically both terrifying and seductive at the same time to children. So not just like your typical entity that preys upon children, which even though you don't ever see it, still in a seductive manner, at the same time in a very frightening manner at the same time, but also at the same time luring them in an unsuspecting way where they actually like what they're doing. In this case, helping the goal, murdering their own families in this case. So even Sinister has kind of a Willy Wonka kind of theme when you look at a lot of the back history involving the character of Bagul.
Yeah, I enjoy the first Sinister, and like that whole camera footage and the video footage of the scenes was wild.
I saw that in the theater, and it was like a week or two before Halloween, so we probably could have chose a better time. And when we went, there was like maybe only 2 other people in the theater. At that time, I was only 19 years old, and I'll never forget how scared I was. I saw that. My blood was running cold, and it's again very rare that I have that kind of experience. But I agree, though it's very eerie to see 16 millimeter film running and have these gruesome murders of these families killed in just horrific, diabolical ways, and not even have sound in it too. You don't hear. There's no screams. There's no sound effects. You don't even hear the sounds of like the attacks or anything like that. It's just so eerie to watch something like that.
Robert says, take the Oompa Loompas and give their backstory.
That is true too. Yeah, that's right. And speaking of Sinister, if you guys haven't heard, they're trying to make a new sequel to it.
Okay.
I can see that. They're not done making money from that franchise.
Well, I know they made a sequel back in 2015, which I heard it was not as good as the first one, other than maybe
It wasn't. I've seen it.
I know some of the murder sequences were kind of there in a way, but Scott Derrickson had said in an interview that the second one may have not done so well, but he just kind of imagined it just didn't go the way it should have been. So I guess in a way they're trying to kind of reboot it and try to start fresh. So in a way, if they make this new Sinister movie, it's going to ignore the events of the second film. This will be literally the real sequel to the first one. I mean, it might still have the character Deputy So-and-so, as he's called, but It's going to be taken in a very different direction. And at one point with Sinister, they were going to, in fact, make a crossover because this was done by some of the same people who also did the movie Insidious. They thought to themselves, well, maybe they might be able to do a crossover with, both movie franchises. And they had a good title for it too, which would have been called In Sinister. So,
Nice.
But unfortunately, the plans never went through. So I'm not sure if they're still planning on making it now because it's been several years ago. But they are trying to bring the character back, Bagul, and his horrific snuff movies.
Which is good because, like, I feel like the character is a cool idea. So I feel like they have a lot of potential they could bring for that character more.
To me, I think he's kind of like the modern day, like Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger. I mean, he literally could have potential of being like one of those modern day slashers that could have a franchise of his own.
That's arts. That's arts now.
Yeah.
I think Art took that trophy now.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of a slasher that's been that known since like Ghostface.
Yeah. Yeah, it says here, I just looked it up. So in October of last year, Scott Derrickson stated that he had interest in returning to the Sinister franchise. While the filmmaker said he believed that Sinister 2 hadn't taken the right approach, he stated that he believes there are various ways that a sequel could be developed moving forward, but that's all the information they have for it.
Well, I'm hoping they make it that one because I did like the first one a lot. So
obviously they can't, because as we all know what happens at the end, there's no way to bring back Ethan Hawke or anybody because they were murdered at the end of the film. But even the guy who plays Bagul, you could clearly tell he's wearing a mask. So again, even though many years have passed since the original, and he's probably older now, it wouldn't matter because he would be under either a mask or a lot of makeup.
they can cover it up, right?
You can cover it up, yeah. So it wouldn't matter how old he would be now, since it's been over 12 years since Sinister originally came out.
That's the benefit of having makeup or masks and all that for villains. You can still cover it up for most part. I know they're trying to push Robert Englund to be Freddy Krueger again, but he keeps on saying he's just too old and too tired to play it, and he doesn't want to put makeup on for 8 hours, which I don't blame him. I imagine it is a lot of work.
Right. I'm just looking at the comments. Hey, Ed, what's going on? He's in the chats. Yeah, it's just amazing, like when you have all this makeup and stuff that can really be beneficial. And it's funny to think, I've always heard from Robert Englund that every time that he dresses up in his Freddy outfit or like with all the makeup on him, he always says a lot of times that this will definitely be his very last time he's going to do it. He's not going to do it anymore. But then a few years later, he comes back and he does the same thing again.
I would love to have a proper send-off for Robert Englund.
Yes. I was thinking about this movie. This movie. Jill made me excited. I was thinking about this movie earlier. Shutter. I couldn't remember the name of the movie. The Japanese version is better than the American version. I will say that. So.
See, I've only seen the American one. I've been trying to see the Japanese. Even when I saw the American one, I even thought to myself, you know what? I'm betting Japan has done it far better than this one.
It did, even though it wasn't, like I said, always say before, even if the budget isn't as high as the American, somehow they make sure it's still better.
I've never seen a Japan version of Shutter. I've seen the American version.
I've seen both, and I do prefer the Japan version.
I've seen both. Oh, Jill said she's seen both of them too. The one from 2004 and American one, 2008. Yeah, one of these days I'm gonna have to try. I'm gonna have to try to get a chance to try to watch the Japanese version.
Japanese versions usually are better than American versions.
Well, it's funny is all this talk about like Japanese horror films. And Amanda, I think you've probably seen me write about it a few times on Facebook, is how I used to run a paranormal club back when I was in high school.
Yeah.
It's
still going today?
Yeah, it's still running to this day. Been running since 2007.
Nice.
And so it's phenomenal. I actually tried reaching out to the sponsor, see if they want me to come out and speak so I could talk to the kids that, that are now running it. But when I was running it myself, I think probably the last year before I graduated was we did watch a couple horror films, in the supernatural genre, and we mainly watched a lot of the Japanese horror films. So we watched, the Jew on the Grudge. We watched Ringu. I think we might have watched one more. I can't remember what the other one was. I don't know if we ever did get to watch it, but it was originally planned. We were also going to watch the original version of One Missed Call, but I don't think we ever got to that. But yeah, we even at my school we watched a lot of the original Japanese versions, never the American ones.
Because they're creepier.
Yeah, they are. That was definitely a much better approach. And even today, there still aren't that very many paranormal clubs in high schools. If there were, they would have obviously probably watched a lot of the American versions. But the fact that there's only just a few of these like scattered throughout, I mean, who knows? My paranormal club is probably the only one within the entire state of Illinois to exist. But we still took a much different approach by watching these foreign horror movies.
I think it's good to have all that. I think you should watch foreign horror films. You should watch American versions. You should watch these low budget ones. You should watch more than just the one genre just to get an idea for them.
I do recommend that if there's watching the Japanese version than watching the American remake of it. Of any, because I know there's a bunch that's done it.
Yeah.
Of any of them. I still, like I said, I always prefer the Japanese versions, but
it's like even Wreck and Quarantine, and even like they remade Inside. It's like a French horror film.
Inside, yes.
And the American version was awful. Oh
my God.
Nothing like the original.
Inside, I've only seen just parts of it, but the French version, oh my God, it's got to be one of the bloodiest movies ever made. I mean, I've never seen the amount of, it's very grand guignol, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And that's definitely probably one of my top 10 favorite splatter movies ever made.
Oh, it's shocking. And then I watched the American version because I was curious. I was like, I don't know how they're going to pull this off for the American version. And they did. They dumbed it down. They took out all like the best parts. Yeah, they took out like the best parts and like the tension and all that. It was like not really scary. It wasn't like gory. It was like nothing. They like took everything that was beloved in the original and just dumbed it down. I was like, this is terrible.
From what I heard, and I'll tell anybody this, for those who want to check out that movie Inside, if you want to, I don't know if you've seen it, Amanda. Have you ever seen that one before?
I'm not sure if I have.
Well, if you ever do decide, and for anybody who's like huge into like a lot of the gory stuff, if you want to check out Inside, make sure to definitely check out the unrated version, because the rated version I think was at least about 10 minutes shorter. That's how gory this movie is, and the title, it's also, if you kind of want to look at it, it's also a Christmas horror film too, because it takes place around the holiday Christmas season. And I'm just going to say this because I don't want to say too much. The title, because it involves kind of like a home invasion in a way. The title of the movie actually has two meanings to it. One of them being the obvious. It's involving a woman who's trying to get inside the house, but there's something else that she's trying to get into. And I think I'll let the movie speak for itself. That's all I'm going to say.
And yeah, no, I recommend checking it out if you don't mind the whole gory stuff. And it's intense. Like there's some very intense moments where you're like on the edge of your seat. You're like, you're cheering for the main actress to get out of the situations.
I think what also makes it more frightening is that it's involving a woman in this case too. I'm not talking just the main character, but the antagonist too. And that's the other thing. What I love about it is far more frightening than what a male could do is a woman that they just go on this huge blood fest. And throughout a good majority of the movie. And it's just, you would never think a woman could do this in this. You would think more of a guy, but man, it's like sometimes you think, geez, these girls can be as bad as the guy, even if not worse than the guys are. And that's what I think what makes Inside just a classic splatter film.
Yes. Recommend it out. I don't recommend checking out the American version. I check out the original version.
Better, way better.
Yeah.
Oh, Jill
Kill
brought
Bill.
not a horror movie, but it definitely is very.
She's
It's
badass
definitely
in
very
that.
gory though. My dad is a big fan of the Kill Bill movies.
Good stuff. She is awesome in Kill Bill.
I've tried getting myself into Kill Bill, but only problem is, I mean, those movies are really long, and it's hard to keep focus on it. So I like the gore in it. Don't get me wrong, but it was hard for me to continue following it with just, what is it, like a 4-hour movie or something like that?
It's pushing, I think 2.5, 3 hours.
Yeah, I don't know. I just couldn't get myself into the Kill Bill movies for some reason.
Well, even if you want to go to like Death Proof with Quentin Tarantino, they made the girls beat the hell out of Kurt Russell.
Oh my gosh, jeez, poor Kurt Russell.
So I'm like, I enjoy when they have a good female lead and they make her like just like a badass. I enjoy those. Even Terrifier. I know people are not huge Terrifier fans, but the lead actress in those, awesome. She's phenomenal. You want her to live. You want to see her beat the shit out of Art the Clown.
I was just talking with someone last night that he wasn't too crazy about the Terrifier movies, and I still haven't seen them myself. I've been trying to, again, another movie to add to my watch list, but from what I heard, they're extremely violent, gory movies too. Like, again, it's just completely up there.
It's definitely the most goriest horror films I've seen in like theaters, like the big screen. Like, obviously some movies don't go to the theaters, they go to streaming and DVDs, so I don't really count those. But an actual big screen film, I was like, this is wild how much they're showing. And the female lead in that, she's awesome. She did it great. She very believable. Even Art the Clown, played by David Howard Thornton, phenomenal actor. I know a lot of people compare those movies to like just gore, snuff film, torture, but to see David Howard Thornton's acting, he has that whole Charlie Chaplin, Mr. Bean vibes. Great voice actor too. If you ever see his voice acting stuff, he does a very cool Mark Hamill Joker voice.
I honestly didn't even know that was David Howard David that portrayed Art the Clown. Honestly,
he's awesome.
Yeah, he looks really good with it.
And just even seeing clips of him with kids at conventions.
Oh my God.
Like, super nice to everybody. He super nice to kids. He just seems like a nice general guy. Nice guy to talk to at the conventions. I never met him before, but I've seen nothing but good things from him.
See, I can't believe I can't believe that he would even get pictures, even like in his costume with kids. And that's definitely, Terrifier is definitely not a movie for kids.
No, I think it's because
he's able to get pictures with them is beyond me.
I think it's because of these kids are seeing Art the Clown stuff in Spirit Halloween, stuff like that, and he's a big staple now. Even if they don't watch the movie, they see his image in Spirit Halloween, and then they see him at the conventions. Probably they're like, "That's Art the Clown," and then he loves the kids. It's awesome to see him in full Art the Clown costume, hugging these kids, talking to these kids. Like, that's so cool.
That's true dedication right there, because that's someone who loves doing what he does.
He reminds me of Robert Englund a bit, just how much he loves that character.
And they're already because I know there's a third Terrifier coming out, a Christmas horror film in this case once again, but they already said they're already planning on making a Terrifier 4.
Number 3 was wild. I got to watch it twice.
Jeez, I need to catch up with these movies.
And I love it just because like this movie Terrifier 1, I think, was like $100,000 budget, first one. And then the second one, I think, was like 200,000. And then the third one is 2.5 million. And it's still independent horror film. And it's killing the box office. Like, it's making a ridiculous amount of money on box office right now. It knocked off the Joker.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's wild. And that's cool. I even said this in a podcast and like interview saying this is awesome for people that are independent. This is going to be opening up a lot more doors for people potentially putting these horror movies in theaters that not going to cost $80 million.
No, not at all. Well, you know, since you brought that up, that actually reminds me of something else because and this goes back to again another like when we were talking about this particular film in the books, like the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books, for example. Over the last number of years, there have been a lot of writers out there who have been inspired to make their own books like that, to pay homage to the original trilogy. In fact, this is what I just got in the mail. This is one of them. This is probably the newest edition called The Truest Sense. And you could see
the artwork.
You could see it's got that cover, although there are no other pictures in it. It was just made for the, but still, it pays homage to the original trilogy. There's one particular franchise that has been made. They're coming out also with a new book too, called Nightmare Soup. Again, another tribute to the trilogy of the original trilogy, and they also have made a second franchise called Nightmare Society, which Nightmare Soup. Those books are intended for. They are still violent and scary and disturbing, but it's kind of about that same age group as the original Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, ages 8 and plus. Nightmare Society, however, on the other hand, they're more violent and more adult related. So those ones are more for teenagers and adults. It's about 13 or 14 plus. But from what I recently had discovered about these books, what goes back to the subject matter about like these movies or whatever is that I had found out a few days ago from their Facebook page that actually I got it on my phone, fortunately. So give me a second while I'm looking it up. But I couldn't believe when I heard about this. It was, okay, yeah, here it is. They said this 2 days ago. Fun fact, the parent, because they also started a podcast of their own. Not a podcast like this, though. I think kind of more of reading their stories, I guess. I haven't really had a chance to tune into it yet. But they said, sorry, cat's getting in the way. Hi, Slinks. You had something to say, too? She wants to be part of the conversation, of course. It says, the parent company of the one producing the Nightmare Soup podcast is the same one that distributes Terrifier 3, the number one movie in the country last week. Who knows? Maybe a Nightmare Soup movie is coming in the near future. This is something we're definitely interested in, so help us raise funds for more creepy projects and check out the Nightmare Ultimate Feast Kickstarter. So yeah, even the podcast is distributed by the same company that did Nightmare Soup 3.
Nice.
And I'm a huge fan of, I mean, again, being someone who grew up with those original books and all these books that have came out over the last couple of years. I've been a huge supporter, big fan. I haven't really done a lot of the Kickstarter, funding, at least because money's been tight, but still, I've always been there as a big supporter. And the fact that we have these that I've been able to help them out, promote their books, advertise them. It's great, to help out with these books. And even more amazingly, not only do they have this company that distributed Terrifier 3, this was another good nostalgic case of like old television shows from the 90s. They even had John Kassir advertise.
Oh, really?
And he not only did he appear on camera, he even spoke in his Crypt Keeper voice. And after all these years, he still has it. He still has the Crypt Keeper voice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was just I think he's like in his early 70s now, and it's just so I mean, to basically describe him, yeah, he's older, but that's all. I mean, he still has the voice. I mean, and he still speaks it every now and then, not just for Nightmare Soup. He still does it to this very day. So he still loves voicing his character.
That's sweet. Yeah, I met him too, and he definitely loves that Crypt Keeper character.
What I actually did at one point was, and he does have a Facebook. After I saw the advertisement, I thought to myself, like thinking, you know what? I have a really cool idea. I doubt it's gonna work, but it's not. It's doesn't hurt to try. I've actually made a. Hey, good to see you, Terry. I actually had made audiobooks, as a matter of fact. I first couple ones I did myself, but then I decided to expand and start offering different other paranormal podcast hosts like to take part in an audiobook, which I've done for one of the Nightmare Suit books, which was a total success. But I thought to myself, how cool would it be if John Kassir, if he has a few minutes of his time to record a story in his Crypt Keeper voice? That would just be like the best thing I could ever get from anyone for an audiobook story. So I did message him. Unfortunately, I have not heard back from him, which, was kind of expected, but I'm going to wait a few. I mean, he's still a very busy guy. So most likely it's probably going to be several days before I ever hear back from him. So it's definitely a fingers crossed moment. Hopefully he says yes.
You never know. Like it's hard to say. Like, before Terrifier 2, I was talking to David Howard Thornton there, and yeah, I sent him off a jersey actually with his Art the Clown stuff on the back, and I'm like, that's sweet. But now he's getting quite well known, so his times are probably getting more busy,
more hectic. Yeah.
So
it's
cool talking to these guys.
I basically said, if John Kassir says yes, I mean, I literally will be crying at that point. Because it's like, that's the best thing that you could ask for someone to record a story for you and have it in part of your collection. So it's just a wait and see mode. Every now and then, even still today, I've been checking my phone to make sure that maybe I didn't miss it yet. But so far, I haven't missed it.
You never know. I don't know. Just keep on holding off, man. You just never know. It might be.
I've had to do it when I'm at work because I don't want to miss that moment to respond to him very quickly, because who knows how much time he probably has to speak on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. He might not have time at all. Like, check it once a year, even.
It would just be that kind of moment. I'm thinking, you know what? I know I should be working, but screw it. I'm gonna reply back to him while I have the opportunity.
That's sweet. That'd be awesome. That'd be perfect person to have do the voice too.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to wait and see. So I know he just came back from a horror film convention too. There was Scarefest weekend that was going on. It was going on down in Lexington, Kentucky, and he was among one of the volunteers that was there. I didn't see if David was part of that one. I don't know. Again, like you said, now that he's a lot more busy, it's probably very difficult for him to go to a lot of these different horror conventions. There's probably only certain ones that he attends. So I didn't see him on the list, though, surprisingly.
No, I think David Howard Thornton will get quite a bit of attention now that Terrifier 3 blew up.
And soon 4.
And 4, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not over for him yet.
No. I'm happy for him. I hope he even achieves more stuff.
Definitely.
Have you seen it's not a horror movie, but have you seen the Marvel movies, Nick?
Like I said, I've seen Doctor Strange. Isn't that a Marvel movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that, and of course, I do have my share of comedy films too. Of course, undoubtedly, I also have seen Deadpool. I love Deadpool, of course. I mean, who doesn't?
Deadpool's technically both Marvel and DC.
Yeah, very much so.
Crazy. Yeah, but when you bring it up earlier, the actor who said he was getting too old for his role, that's originally why Robert Downey Jr., he left Iron Man. I'm surprised he's coming back as Dr. Doom.
I know. I'm really surprised by that too.
Fun fact, have you seen Devon? Maybe you have the Marvel movies.
I've seen a few. Yeah, I love Deadpool. I've watched the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Spider-Man, obviously. Spider-Man's one of those things I will always watch. Spider-Man in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. I grew up with that, so I will always watch Spider-Man. X-Men is another one I'll always watch too.
Robert
This
White
is
says,
gonna be a this is obviously going to be a very what's the word we're looking for.
Robert,
If you plan on seeing it, this is going to give it away. But if the but Endgame, so you see at the end of Endgame, you see Captain America, but you see him as an older man,
Yeah.
and he passes the passes the torch on to someone else, not the torch, his shield to someone else. The fun fact is that if what is his name, the comic book creator,
Stanley.
oh, Stanley.
Stan Lee, if Stan Lee did not pass away, it was supposed to be him as old Captain America, and all of because everyone was asking, well, if Captain America already knew everything was going to happen, why did he go back? And he technically did. If Stanley didn't die, all his appearances in all the previous movies were supposed to be revealed that it was actually Captain America checking on everyone.
Huh. That's awesome.
But unfortunately, with him passing away, they changed it to
Yeah.
him, just the old man. But yeah, Stanley was supposed to be the old Captain America at the end.
Stan Lee would have probably loved that.
Well, I'm sure he
Yeah,
would have.
that's what they're aiming for, and that's what I think he was in on it, where he was going to be the old Captain America. Uh, yeah, because they were planning on that. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
rest his soul, he passed away before he was able to film that.
You could tell even his little cameo appearances in movies for Marvel, it looked like he had fun just being in that 1 minute or 30-second clips.
Yeah.
See that it's like it seems like that just they're just memorable in that case, and it's sad to see, like, of course, when you have that type of actor, who's just at an old age to just play a role like that and then have, or in a way, or in other words, pass away. It's sad to see that stuff, certain individuals like that going.
Because he's played a staple in like pretty much a huge amount of people's lives too, right?
Yeah, like over the last 50 years or so. I mean, he had been doing it since the 60s, I think, if not even the late 50s.
And like, even if you don't read comic books, you watched him in movies or TV shows, right?
He was on everything.
Everything.
And again, not just in the Marvel or superhero genre. He was just someone who just loved to play with different genres. So whether you were a fan of that kind of stuff or not, you always saw him somewhere.
Yeah.
We were talking, Terry, we were talking horror movies. That's what the topic's been about tonight, mostly.
And he influenced a lot of people too, like Kevin Smith, right?
Yeah.
So
real quick, just trying to catch up with the comments here because I see Robert still watching.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. Captain America passes on his shield to his mate Falcon.
Excelsior.
I think originally in the comic book, it was supposed to be Bucky first.
He also says real quick, this is I missed this. He says, "Aren't the clowns of the kids? You're next." Dang, they must be seeing the investment potentials, and then finally in Nightmare Soup coming at you with brains and eyeballs. But yeah, I mean, like we just said though, yeah, it's just he had a huge influence nonetheless, whether you were a fan of the genre or not. He was just he just had a huge influence on a lot of different actors and filmmakers.
Yeah. Even if you're not into like the Marvel stuff, you still did a lot, I think.
He was
so before we let you go, Devon, where can people watch if they wanted to watch any of Dead Prairie Productions movies? Where could they see them?
That's a good question, actually. So they can reach out to me on Dead Prairie Productions on Facebook, X, Twitter, or what do you want to call it? Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it nowadays. Yeah. I keep calling it different things. I was like, I don't know. They can reach out on any social media platform basically, and we have a website, a store called, it's like PayHip, and it's Dead Birds Productions. All our DVDs are available on there. They're $10 per piece, and plus the shipping, obviously. And yeah, the proceeds go to the animal shelters, and we don't make a dime from our films. We've raised over $34,000 in just our town alone. We are raising thousands of dollars for other cities now. And yeah, we don't make a dime. Like, I don't make a cent from these films. All of our actors, crew members are all volunteer based. And if you don't mind the $200 budget films, and if you don't mind the whole cheesy factors, reach out to us. We have a lot of fun films like the Gorfer series, the Killer Balloon. Killer Balloon's a fun one too.
Is there anything else you can tell them maybe about your movies, get them interested without giving away obviously too much?
I would say, yeah, like I find a lot of movies nowadays don't have like behind the scenes and bloopers too. So we threw in like bloopers to show what happens behind the scenes, just to get people like, oh, it looks like it's having a blast, looks like it's having a fun time. Like I said, if you're big into like the old B horror films like Puppet Master, Toxic Avenger, if you like the new B horror movies like Thanksgiving and Carousel, those weird movies, come check us out. I think you guys will have a fun time watching our films. We have clown movies, we have zombie films, we have everything possible, basically. You name it, we've done it just about. We're doing some bizarre things. Even the Killer Balloon, I don't know if it's ever been done, a Killer Balloon movie, so I'll take credit for that one.
The only thing I can think close of is it's not even really like kills, but obviously Stephen King said when all those balloons are going around, they explode and there's blood in them, and but they don't kill. But still, that's the only other thing I could think of.
And
so I'll definitely give you the credit for that one.
I thought of it one day, and like, I have a joke. I thought about it as like a balloon movie, that killer. And like, it's never been done, I don't think, a balloon movie. And like, I have to make it before somebody else makes it.
What was your guys' inspiration behind the movies you make?
My inspirations for movies, I would say, is from me watching these movies. I take some things from like Return of the Living Dead, Shaun of the Dead, Zombieland. We put in the zombie series. Like I said, Puppet Master, I take some of the stuff that I love from the Puppet Master series. So if you watch these movies, you're like, wait a minute, that kind of looks familiar. It's my love to that movie. I'm not trying to steal that person's art. It's just me. Like, I loved watching these as a kid, and it's like, here's my inspiration. And sometimes, I don't know, I'd be like sometimes driving my car and like think of an idea for a death scene, or there I am waking up from my sleep having coffee and like, that'd be a cool little scene. So then I keep that in my mind for the future movies even.
Yeah.
Now I hope one day you find a creepy doll and you make a creepy doll movie where it comes out to you in your dreams.
I do have a doll movie. I'm making a doll one, but it doesn't kill people in the dreams. It's more like Slappy and Chucky and.
Hey, I'm just gonna say, you better take it while you still can, because it's only a matter of time before somebody else takes it.
He needs to do that movie.
Somebody's definitely gonna do it.
That would definitely be a good movie. He needs to do that with the doll. And then he needs to come back to Spooky Japan and advertise about it, since he got the idea here. So
yeah, I would definitely give you guys credit for that.
It'd be like, you guys have to watch this movie.
I like it. No, I've never really seen a Nightmare on Elm Street Child's Play movie basically put together.
Well, okay. I'm gonna give one more trivia fact before we end things. Actually, it's two separate ones. Did you know that because of the success of Freddy versus Jason, they wanted to make another crossover like that, but this time it was going to be with Candyman and and Leprechaun, actually. And Tony Todd, when he was offered it, he's like, No, I am not doing that because he has too much profound respect for his character. And I
Yeah.
can see why. Because obviously, Leprechaun, obviously, it's supposed to be funny in addition to being creepy, but Candyman, on the other hand, is supposed to be like dead serious.
Yep.
But that's actually what we're going to be talking about on Fear Fans tomorrow night, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, that was never, Tony Todd would say that is not going to happen. But the other trivia fact, and I just found this out earlier today, and this involves that movie, Freddy versus Jason. Even though it was supposed to be specifically focused on just those two,
Yep.
there was almost an attempt that they actually wanted to add a third killer, but only just for the ending of. So you remember, obviously, at the end when
Pinhead.
Jason's walking, he's got Freddy's head. Well, they were supposed to either end up in a nightmare or somewhere in hell.
Yeah.
And Pinhead from Hellraiser was supposed to make a cameo appearance, but even for a cameo appearance, unfortunately, Doug Bradley, he was just too expensive to have even for a cameo. So it was supposed to be meant as a great surprise, as a good way to end the movie. Thinking, oh geez, now Pinhead's involved, but they couldn't do that, so they just left it, of course, as just Freddy versus Jason. So had they made it, it would have been in the same universe in a way.
They had I think there's artwork of the concept of Pinhead being in hell with Jason and Freddy. I think they drew like the storyboard of it. So there's some images of that on the internet, I believe.
Yeah,
it's cool.
I don't remember. I don't know if I'm going to find the image. I did see an image early. Oh wait, this is probably the only image I was able to find. I think this is what I found earlier today. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably as close as you could ever get.
I wish they did. They should have paid Doug Bradley the money and said, "Yeah, come on in." They made a lot of money anyways from that movie.
Yeah, it says here again, real short. It says here we almost had Pinhead appear at the end of Freddy versus Jason. However, the rights to his character was considered too costly, and they chose to exclude him. He would have appeared with Freddy and Jason fighting in hell.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, that probably would have made it even better. That I could picture it already. I think that would have been a real badass scene.
The perfect ending, I'd say.
Yeah, very much so.
Awesome. I'm gonna go feed my dog. I think he's been trying to
Yeah,
give the SOS.
She's getting late. Like I said, I mean, these could go for a while. If you guys are both up to it, I'd love to get back with you guys for a part 2.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
Maybe at some point, Devon, we'll try to get you also on our Fear Fan show. I mean, even though it's mostly a show that we talk about the movies themselves in general,
yeah,
I'm just going to say every once in a while, the crew and I, and Amanda, if you ever want to be part of this too, you're more than welcome to. We have watch parties where we will watch a movie before we do an episode. And this just gave me an idea. The fact that you've made a couple movies yourself, I just thought, how cool would it be if we had one of those watch parties, watch one of your films, and then maybe like a week or two later, have you on the show so you could talk about, that particular movie. I think that would be a pretty cool idea.
I'm down for it. 100%.
Yeah, we'll definitely make it happen. I don't know exactly when. I'll have to talk to Don because he's the one that is actually the one who runs it. I'm just a co-host. But what's also unique too is Fear Fans is also a show where we have different paranormal podcast hosts come together, hang out. We talk about different movies. Of course, we also have a laugh too. We try to make it fun for everyone, but we'll definitely try and see if we can kind of make a little bit of a change with the show and see if maybe, we can try to get you on and you can talk about one of your movies then.
That'd be sweet. I'll be down. 100%.
Get more people interested, yeah.
No, I love doing it. I enjoy doing this.
But thank you so much for joining us today. We had a blast. Hopefully you did. So
that's awesome.
Hopefully we'll see you in the future again with us. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
And everyone else out there, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Almost 3.5 hours, but hey,